The Number 2 Me and the Number 1 Girl. Volume 1, by Oshu. Translated by 1/4 Read Translations. Audiobook by Masquerade at Masquerade Audiobooks. The Abandoned Kitten, Her, and Me. Prologue. I know this is quite sudden, but there exists 2 Satou Hajime in my school. Yep, you guessed it, literally the exact same name and surname. I mean, there are just way too many Satou Hajimes. Try searching the name on the internet and a lot would pop out. There is even a long list of results in Wikipedia. Now, what does it mean when 2 people have the same name in the same school? They would naturally be compared against each other. Well, this can't be helped. Both would even be confused as to what they would call each other, right? Obviously, the first Satou Hajime is just your ordinary boy. The other Satou Hajime, however, is not just any other Satou Hajime. First of all, he is handsome, has a tall stature, well-defined features, and an aura that can make you gasp in awe even at a distance. Next, sports. With his physique, he joined the basketball club and became a regular member in the blink of an eye. Furthermore, he's also good with studies and is within the top 10 in the midterms exam. On top of that, he has a good personality and has good knowledge about anime and mangas while being in the most popular group in the school. He is what you call a top predator. Luckily or unluckily, our hierarchy had already been set before we even had our fight. He is Satou number 1 while I was number 2. As such, when people with loose mouths started using the nicknames, it started to spread so quickly that I could not even disapprove of the nickname. This is a story about me, a number 2, becoming a number 1 for a certain someone. Section. Hajime, you didn't have a part-time job today, did you? Can I go to your house? After the homeroom, immediately after the teacher left, a girl with an overly enthusiastic smile, Minamino Chinatsu, who is not only popular in the class, but in the whole grade level as well, said as such, making the time in the classroom seemingly stop for a moment. Although she wasn't loud, she stood out. Whilst calling her as the number 1 beauty in the entire grade level could be a matter of taste and there might be mixed receptions, no one disagrees that she is beautiful in her own right. She was shoulder length or just below shoulder length, clear black hair, large eyes that change from one emotion to the next, and a small, well-balanced nose. She often smiles with her mouth open, but her lips are cute and don't look unseemly. She is neither too tall nor too short, a little below my eye level, which is at 170 centimeters, so she must be in the mid 160 centimeters range. Her breasts are not big enough to be noticeable on her uniform, but they are on the larger side for her slender figure. The hem of her slightly short, above-the-knee skirt, which just barely violates school rules, reveals her translucent white skin, but there is nothing unhealthy about it, and combined with her aura of healthy beauty itself, it makes her look even more attractive. A high-spec girl capable of doing sports and studies, a total opposite of me, who is self-aware of being an inconspicuous male student. I may have friends I can spend lunch together with and classmates that I can have light conversations with. As a member of the Go Home Club, I don't have any friends close enough to hang out with outside the school. Heck, I'm even confident that none of them would consider me as their best friend. I'm neither someone who stands out in a bad way nor an introvert, and definitely not someone who has a talent that can trigger some kind of event and draw everyone's attention. I'm also not the kind who, if I styled my hair a different way, would reveal my hidden handsome face. Rather, I am someone who goes out in the morning to a salon to fix myself, and would still just look plainly average. In the enclosed world of high school, during the winter of my first year's 3rd semester, calling me by name in an intimate way could have sparked a major incident. This is because the girl who was calling me by name was extremely popular, not only among the students on the same grade level but also among male senior students, and nobody, not even her fellow girls, had anything negative to say about her. Huh? Why are number 2 and Minamino together? What kind of relationship do they have? Maybe she mistook him as the other Satou? Probably not, considering she's in front of him. I knew it. Those two. All kinds of whispers filled my ears. To be precise, those whispers were divided into a group of girls with the know-it-all expressions, A group of girls who looked interested. A group of boys with displeased expressions. Surprised students. Students who acted uninterested but still couldn't hide their interested faces. At any rate, we stood out too much, perhaps the most I stood out ever since entering this school. But then, we both knew this was going to happen. In my opinion, she is so pretty that she could rival the heroines of every story, but she is not completely unaware of her influence. Unlike an unwitting heroine, she knows how to read the air and how she is perceived, which is why she has been able to maintain her popularity without making enemies in her current position. And I know that she had been restless since morning. The fact that my smartphone was vibrating to inform me of messages from her, more than usual, from my thigh was evidence of that. Chinatsu, today's the day, isn't it? Chinatsu, I already told Yuko and the others that I won't be going home with them today. Chinatsu, actually, it would have been okay to do the reveal during lunch break, but no, it's better to just go home together today and sleep on it. Chinatsu, hey, Chinatsu, it seems like I'm the only one who's feeling nervous. It's not fair. Chinatsu, it's not fair. Hajime, no, I'm in class right now. Chinatsu, studying is more important to Hajime than I am. Chinatsu, I see. Chinatsu, HMPH. Chinatsu, you keep ignoring me even though I love you so much. Hajime, breaking news. While I was attentively listening to the class, my beloved girlfriend turned into a yandere. We usually exchange casual messages, and the messaging app is what connects our high school lives while we keep our relationship hidden. But today, the messages were particularly frequent. Her light-hearted tone couldn't conceal her nervousness, and if it wasn't just my imagination, she was also showing her happiness. When I recalled such an exchange in class earlier, I relaxed my mouth and smiled, then looked at Minamino Chinatsu and answered, "Of course, that's fine, but can I stop by the supermarket on the way back to pick up some ingredients for dinner? What should we make for today's dinner? Since it's Friday and meat is cheap, maybe we can go for something hearty. I'm actually planning on buying ingredients on the way home, so it's not a lie, but it's not something I need to mention here." After showing a casual exchange as if just to show our intimacy, the class noise further increased, something I can easily ignore. Her friends had already laid the groundwork, and my friends, which are few in number, didn't have interests in such topics in the beginning anyway. Just saying. Well then, let me introduce myself again. My name is Satou Hajime. Of the two Satou Hajime in this high school, I am known as the number 2. However, despite being known as the number 2 by everyone, she made me her number 1. To understand why she's always shining her radiant smile on me, we need to go back a few seasons. Chapter 1. The first time I talked to Minamino Chinatsu was during the autumn, under a big tree in a park located halfway up a slope called Sakurazaka Park. As the name suggests, beautiful cherry blossoms bloom in spring, but during the deep autumn season when summer has ended, there is usually no sign of people around. In such a place, I saw a girl who looked familiar squatting in her school uniform. I stopped and hurriedly approached her, wondering if she was feeling unwell. If I remember correctly, you're Minamino-san, right? What are you doing here? Are you fine? Do you feel sick? You. She raised her head in surprise and looked towards me with an expression that looked as if me being here was unexpected. Sate-kun. Were you out on a jog? Judging from my get-up, she probably deduced that I was out jogging. I nodded at her question and replied, "Well, since I'm in the go-home club, it wouldn't be a surprise if my body would become dull, and my house is nearby, so on days when I have time, I jog around this area at this time." "You're an odd one." "If that's the case, why don't you join a club? You don't hate exercising or sports if you're willingly out on a jog, right?" Well, I have a part-time job, so..." "Wait, we're going off track. Aren't you here squatting down because you feel sick or something?" That's not it." After saying so, she slightly raised her body, and revealed a small cardboard box in front of her. Finally, there was something on her chest that I couldn't see before. A small kitten? Yeah, it looks like it's an abandoned kitten, and it seems to be really weak. She said that it only meowed once, and when she approached it, It was already completely languid. My mother has a severe cat allergy, so we can't keep it. But I saw it, and I just couldn't leave it alone. So I was thinking about what to do. Usually, she was always cheerful and laughing. Although I don't know her well since we don't have much of an interaction with each other, the image of her always brightening up the class atmosphere just by being there is like the image of the sun. To be honest, I didn't intend to get involved with her too much. However, when I saw her murmuring with a very sad and lonely expression, I felt compelled to do something to help her, which was a bit out of character for me. Think, feel, and just give it a try. Following the words that were often told to me this year, I thought for a while. The answer was already set. I see, I understand. Let's take the kitten to the vet for now. Also, it might be a bit tough for me to keep the kitten forever, but I can temporarily take care of it at my place. Eh? When I said that, Minamino-san's big eyes widened even more and let out a much higher-pitched voice before looking at my face unblinkingly. Look, I'd just feel bad to leave the kitten like this. And, well, even though I said I'll take care of the kitten, it will only be for a while, alright? We have to look for someone who can adopt it. I think Minamino-san is cute. The boys in our class consider themselves lucky to be in the same class with her, and her name occasionally comes up during joint classes. Her name has never been absent from the daily discussions about which guy likes which girl. Well, I have never participated in such discussions myself, but I wholeheartedly agree that she is cute. The group of girls she belongs to are at the top of the social hierarchy in terms of ranking, so to speak. She was inclusive and treated everyone, including those outside of their group, without discrimination. She never flaunted her looks or abilities. At the very least, from my perspective, she was a popular and kind girl, like someone out of a picture book. And, when I was being intently looked at by such a cute girl whom I had never talked to before, I couldn't help but feel embarrassed. To avoid her gaze, I turned on my smartphone screen. I searched for a nearby veterinary clinic and quickly dialed their phone number. While Minamino-san looked a bit absent-minded by my sudden phone call, I explained the situation to the receptionist on the other end and made an appointment with the vet. For some reason, I was praised for calling to check on an abandoned kitten. Even though I didn't actually find the kitten myself, I felt a twinge of guilt and turned to Minamino-san with a smile. Smiling comes naturally to me from working part-time jobs. I'm relieved. They said we can go and have the kitten checked now. They also asked me if the kitten was vaccinated, its age and all that, but I have no idea about those, so I just said I'll bring the kitten to them so they can see for themselves. If it's sick, they'll give medicine, and if it needs more nutrition, maybe they'll give a drip. Also, I need to stop by home to get my wallet and withdraw some money at the convenience store on the way. Sorry to ask, but can you come with me? My house is just around the corner, and I can't go into the convenience store with the kitten in my arms, I continued. Sure. Of course. Or rather, I was the one who found the kitten, so I was naturally gonna do my best to find someone who can adopt it. Was Satou this kind of character? I'm starting to get really worried about how other people actually see me, though. No. You see, yes. You somehow seem very kind. I'm even more worried now. I mean, with that impression, it wouldn't be hard for me to just run away and say goodbye, right? How cold do you think I am? True, but that's not it. Even though we're classmates, we've hardly ever talked before. Still, you are worried about me just because you saw me squatting here, and you came over to make sure if I was fine and asked if I was sick or something. Isn't that normal? Geez, I'm saying that being able to call that normal means you are really kind. Minamino-san spoke up in a slightly angry tone for some reason. You don't need to get so angry to the point of turning red. Even though I said I was inconspicuous, my social skills shouldn't have been so terrible. However, it seems that I still lack the level to deal with girls. Ahaha, sorry I guess. Well then, even if it was meowing weakly, I don't think it's in immediate danger, but maybe we should hurry. I'll guide you there. So will you accompany me? Should I carry the kitten, or would you like to hold it as it is? I'll also bring the cardboard box, just in case. I asked Minamino-san and started walking along the road I had jogged from earlier. Minamino-san, who was still looking at me with interest, nodded. I'm sorry, I'll take you to the vet right away, so please hang in there a bit longer. Nya. Satan. It meowed. I'm glad. It's probably just not feeling well because it's hungry. I just hope it's not an illness or anything. As we walked, the kitten in the arms of Minamino-san, who was walking behind me while gently soothing the kitten, let out a weak but steady meow, indicating that it was still alive. It was a kitten with beautiful white fur. Chapter 2. After leaving the park, we turned right along a narrow road that goes up a hill. The area we passed through had a consistent design, a tract housing kind of feel, though it wouldn't be appropriate to describe it as such. My house was situated in a corner of this residential area. There was no garden and my bicycle was parked alone in the empty driveway next to the entrance. It's a 4LDK, and although each room was not very spacious, my father said that each family member had their own private spaces. My parents fell in love with the price and layout during a housing tour that was more like a date, so we ended up moving during my awkward third year of middle school when I didn't want to change schools due to club activities and exams. But thankfully we were within commuting distance by train, which at that time became a bit of funny joke. Can you wait here for a bit? Actually, it'd be very rude of me to just make you stand in front of the house, so why don't you come in? I want to take the kitten to the vet as soon as possible, so I think just taking my wallet would be fine. But since I'm done going out on a jog, I want to change clothes or at least wear a jacket. Then I'll wait by the door. By the way, do we not have to tell your parents about you taking care of the kitten? Also, shouldn't I at least greet them? It's fine. Besides, I'm the only one here now, so you don't have to worry too much. I see. Bringing a girl to an empty house without parents around. This changes my impression of you more and more, Satan. So, on top of being kind, are you perhaps also a lady killer? Or perhaps you're just pretending to be sincere and honest while actually being a frivolous playboy? Even though you're damaging my image, you're actually making me laugh. While having such an exchange with Minamino-san, I unlocked the door and invited her inside. Thanks for having me, she said while curiously looking around. I left her at the front door and hurriedly went upstairs. My room was on the left side, just up the staircase from the front door. After entering my room, I noticed my uniform I had taken off earlier when I got home and my wallet lying on the floor. I picked them up, hastily donned my jacket, and made my way downstairs. As I reached the front door, I saw a pretty girl sitting there, talking to a kitten and saying, "You'll feel better soon." I can see why she's popular. How do I say this? There was something about her beyond just her cuteness. She had a certain charm. Moreover, I felt that she seemed to be good at maintaining a comfortable distance, not too close to make me feel uncomfortable, but not too distant to be impersonal. However, I could also feel that there was something strange from her, although I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. Oh, well, isn't it just something you feel when you meet someone for the first time? Sorry for making you wait. Let's go. Also, don't you feel cold, Minamino-san? Though it was far from winter, it was starting to feel chilly as the sun began to set. Amidst this, I wondered if she was cold in her short skirt, so I looked at her sitting there and asked, "It's okay even if it's cold? I look cuter this way," she replied, holding a kitten in one hand and lightly lifting the hem of her skirt with the other in front of me. As she did that, my eyes couldn't find something it could safely land on. Seeing my state, she laughed. "It's fine, you know, I'm actually wearing short leggings. See, I don't know what that is and I am not so bold as to look at it directly. A gentleman, huh? Or are you just a wuss? I prefer the former." While saying that, I went outside and locked the door. I looked at the watch on my left arm. It was 4:30 p.m. There was still time before the sun completely set, but I wanted to hurry considering what comes after. Let's go. The clinic should be around the station if we walk from here. Section. It's so enviable how close your house is to the school. Mine isn't that far either, but I still have to take the train. Well, I actually just applied to schools near my house, and I got lucky that this one is so close. Also, you commute by train, Minamino-san? Yeah, it's only 2 stations from here in Toyoto and just a short walk from Nishihachi. So it's not that far, but I wish I lived as close as Sate-kun, so I could sleep in a little more in the morning. I didn't have that image of you. So, you're not a morning person? No, it's not that. It's just that I have to make my bento, do my makeup and all that. You know, girl stuff. We were walking at a comfortable distance, close enough to reach out and touch hands but not too close. In front of us, we could see a couple, probably middle school students, holding hands and walking in their uniforms. Since we were taking a different route than the one directly from school to the station, there weren't many students from our high school around, but there were a few. I wondered if rumors would spread if a popular girl like Minamino-san walked with a guy. With that in mind, I asked her a question. I don't mean anything weird, but is it okay for you to walk with someone like me? It might be rude to your boyfriend, you know? Unfortunately, I don't have a boyfriend, so it's okay. I understand that you are concerned, but it's fine. It's already late in the afternoon and there are many people around, and besides, you're not even wearing our school uniform, Sate-kun. I see. Then I guess it's fine. You're pretty good at smoothly getting the information that I don't have a boyfriend. I wonder what Sate-kun plans to do with that information? No way. You were the one who quickly admitted you didn't have any. KKH. Even if I already gave away my information, I won't hand you this child no matter what threats I receive. What kind of situation are you making all of a sudden? Well, I'll go and withdraw some money to help that child, so be good and wait here, okay? While we were having such a conversation, I headed towards the ATM at the convenience store we had just arrived at, took out my card from my wallet, and withdrew some money. Although there was a transaction fee, it couldn't be helped. The vet would just tell me they only accept cash payments with a grin on their face. I think having around 30,000 yen for now should be good. I guess it's fine since I do have a part-time job, and with some guidance, I'm earning a decent income. When I looked it up earlier on the way to the convenience store, I found out that things like 4 injections and possibly vaccinations cost a few thousand yen each. Considering the various things needed to keep a kitten, it's probably best to have that amount on hand. Choices. You were absolutely right, uncle. I understand how you feel, but money is neither clean nor dirty. In order to broaden your choices and gain freedom, you need to learn properly. These are the words of my benefactor, who has been teaching me various things. Although I tend to act impulsively, I now realize that even if I wanted to take the cat to the vet, I couldn't do it without the necessary funds. It's only now that I understand what my uncle had been telling me all along. As I began to think about such things more deeply, time passed. While waiting for the money to come out with the sound of the machine, I reflected on these thoughts, and soon enough, the cash, card, and receipt came out. I put the money inside my wallet and looked up outside where Minamino-san was. She was standing there looking somewhat bored. In the midst of the setting sun, a black-haired beautiful girl holding a white kitten stood still, and through the glass it was like a painting. Ah, I see. I understand now. Realizing the source of the strangeness I had been feeling from her for a while, I stepped outside after a little thought. Chapter 3. In conclusion, the kitten's condition was fine. The clinic was located just a short walk from the convenience store. I also called ahead and informed the lady receptionist. Then Minamino-san showed the kitten to the vet. The veterinarian was a young and kind-looking man who patiently explained everything to us high schoolers and skillfully administered the 4th injection. Perhaps he sensed my slight anxiety about the possibility of the kitten having a disease, but the vet smiled and gently reassured me. Yep. The kitten looks fine, although it was on the verge of malnutrition. I already gave it a drip, and if you let it rest well, it should recover. I'm relieved. Thank goodness. We exchanged glances and breathed a sigh of relief. You geese did a good thing bringing the kitten here. Thank you. It was the first time an adult had thanked me to my face, and I felt a little embarrassed. When I told the lady receptionist that I would take care of the kitten at my house, she suddenly made a phone call to someone and had them arrange a kitten starter kit brought in from a nearby store. The kit included a simple carrying cage for the kitten, a kitten litter box including the sand, a scratching post, and bowls for food and water. I was planning to go buy these things myself, but it was very helpful that I could get them here. We were told that we needed to wait a little while, so Minamino-san and I sat side by side on the couch in the waiting room. I'll pay for half of the cost. You know, I was really surprised when I checked the receipt. No, it's fine. I'll be taking care of the kitten anyway, so don't worry about it. No way. I was the one who found it, and Sate-kun just got involved, so it's fine. Actually, finding someone who can adopt it is more of a challenge for me, so I'll pretty much leave that to you. Sorry. Of course. That's fine with me, but are you really sure? Won't it be a hassle for your family? Although, I know it's a bit late to ask for it now, I guess it's reasonable for her to be concerned, I thought. However, she doesn't need to worry about it. As I was wondering how to explain the situation, she suddenly looked at me and shook her head. Sorry, if it's difficult for you to say, it's fine, and thanks. I'll accept your offer, but I insist on paying half of the cost. I don't have cash with me now, but I'll pay you back later. This is non-negotiable. I understand. Then for now, I'll pay for it, but we'll split the cost. Thank you. You really are kind, Sate-kun. As she said those words while looking at my eyes, I couldn't help but avert my gaze a little while hesitating whether to say these words or not. Both you and me just happened to be there where the kitten was abandoned. Sate-kun. Sorry, did I say something that offended you? She asked as she tilted her head towards where I averted my gaze. Seeing her large eyes staring at me, I could feel my slight sense of nosiness growing stronger, and I couldn't help but feel like the strangeness I had felt from her in the beginning was not completely off the mark, making it already unpleasant for me to swallow. If it's only a misunderstanding, then it is a misunderstanding, I thought as I turned my body towards her. Look, Minamino-san, can I have a word with you? Go ahead, she replied a bit nervously as I talked to her in a formal way. Getting her permission, I didn't hesitate to say what was on my mind. It's fine. I don't dislike you, Minamino-san. At my words, she fell silent. The strangeness I felt from her earlier was completely on the mark. Her expression hadn't changed, and she still wore a smile, but there was a subtle shift in her demeanor. Nevertheless, I continued speaking until the end. It might just be a misunderstanding, so you can just let whatever I say pass if you want. But I think you don't have to try too hard to be friends with everyone equally. It might sound strange coming from me, who just spoke to you for the first time today, but I think you are already well liked by everyone, Minamino-san. When I looked at Minamino-san, she appeared frozen and slightly surprised with widened eyes, although it was just a word from a boring dude who was not particularly close to her. It was my sincere thought. I decided to wait silently for her to take the time to digest the meaning of what I said. From there, Minamino-san did not speak a word until the kitten supplies arrived and the paging that told us that the checkup was over. I, too, surrendered myself to the silence. Chapter 4. I was carrying the litter box and all the other items from the kitten starter kit, while Minamino-san held the kitten in the cage. Luckily, the cage had a handle which made it easier to carry. The kitten also appeared to be dozing off inside the cage as we walked. Although we didn't have too far to go, it was quite a struggle to carry all these heavy stuff. To be honest though, I had planned to carry everything myself and part ways with her here, but holding both the cage and litter box simultaneously was proving difficult with my arm length. As opposed to when he came, we walked in silence. The sun had begun to set in earnest, and I couldn't tell what expression Minamino-san had on her face. "You are somewhat strange, you know," was what came out of Minamino-san's mouth as soon as we arrived at my house. I opened the door and set down the litter box. I actually think of myself as pretty normal, though. I guess I used the wrong word, but what I meant was, Sate-kun, you sure are very observant towards people, you know. Is that so? I don't think so. I'm telling you that because you saw right through me easily, she said, pointing at me like a detective who has just identified the culprit. And, after what you said earlier, I've been thinking back on a lot of things, and one thing I've noticed about Sate-kun was that you sure do a lot of things at school without standing out. Like during cleaning time or small class activities, You just smoothly blend in places where it seems like there aren't many people. How do I say this? It's not that you're not noticeable, but it's more like you're trying not to stand out. Hearing that description makes it seem like I'm some kind of overpowered protagonist hiding my power. It's too much of an exaggeration. It seems that the time she went silent was spent reflecting and thinking through things, thinking that she wasn't angry at all. I answered as such while inwardly thinking, I see. She is just as observant as I am. It's not something I can say I've really seen through about her. Rather, I picked up on a subtle hint of strangeness, perhaps a hint of pretense on her part. My intuition tells me that it might be because of the sense of affinity towards individuals who share the same characteristics. She dons a mask to ensure that she is well liked by everyone, going to great lengths to avoid being disliked or making enemies. She strives to maintain a neutral position as much as possible, almost as if she's playing a dating sim that can make her gain or control her likability towards others. On the other hand, I tend to keep a low profile, although it's not like I can't stand out if I try my best. I choose not to draw attention to myself and prefer to live a high school life that lets me not get too involved in things. Initially, I stood out in a slightly negative way when I entered the school, but it wasn't to the extent that it lasted for more than one season. I'm neither someone that is completely invisible nor someone in the center of attention. I wasn't outstanding in academics either, not failing but also not getting top grades. Similarly, I wasn't particularly good or bad at sports, just enough to get through the physical education classes. Perhaps that's why I was, in a sense, the classmate with the least involvement in Minamino-san's life. I wasn't lonely enough to try and get involved with her too much, didn't approach her proactively, and was just at the level of being a classmate she knew by face. Despite this, the way she treated me was no different from that towards the male students in class who were considered close to her. She treats everyone equally without discrimination. It sounds like a normal thing to do, but I couldn't shake off a slight unease. It crossed my mind that, perhaps, just like how I was instinctively putting on my self-defense mechanism, she might also be employing a similar method to adjust her own standpoint. I could have just left her alone. However, I can't deny that I don't feel any inclination to be kind to cute girls, and besides, she has never referred to me as number 2 or brought up the topic. So, rather than forcing herself with things that makes her uncomfortable, I just wanted to tell her that there was no need to insist on such things even in front of someone as inconspicuous as me, especially when there was no one else around who might know her. Are you afraid of being disliked by others? Feeling that a little bit of the tension was released, I decided to ask her such a question. I guess, but that's not exactly it. Say, do you have some time after this, Satou-kun? If it's not too much trouble, that is. Her response made me feel like we had gotten a little bit closer as compared to before where we still had a certain invisible distance between us. I'm cool with it, but what about you? I'm sure you have a curfew or something. This is my house. As for whether I have time, aside from setting up the kitten's litter box and doing some homework, reading manga, and playing games, there's not much else for me to do today. In other words, I do have time. However, the same might not be true for her. It's not too late, but it's not particularly early either. You know, I just felt like having something to talk to you with. Am I not being a bother? Honestly, to an inconspicuous virgin boy, this was like a wish come true, even though it seemed unrealistic. That's fine with me. Oh, and also, just one thing, I'll let you know just in case, but my parents aren't coming back today. NGHH, I didn't know that. What are you trying to, is what you think I'd say, but from your gaze and everything that's happened today, Satou-kun, I don't think you would do anything like that. Yes, I trust you. Don't worry. If you try something, I'll just crush you. Thanks for ruining the few good sentences with that threat. 2 people, a man and a woman, alone at night. Even though being alone together wasn't my intention, just to be safe, I decided to mention that my parents weren't coming back. In response, I was thrown a threat if I try something. That something is, well, I'll leave it to your imagination. Chapter 5. The white kitten was still curled up on the cushion inside the cage, soundly asleep. I prepared the food and water as I was told, and also added a small piece of cardboard from the original litter box to the new one, along with the cat litter. Despite saying she wanted to talk, Minamino-san didn't utter a single word. She sat in the chair in front of the living room table, quietly observing me as I added milk to the coffee I had brought out before sipping it. "What's wrong?" After completely mixing the coffee and milk, I took a seat across from Minamino-san, who was looking at me intently, before asking her such a question. "Yep, instant coffees are good too. Nothing. It's just that I noticed how skilled you are with household chores, like making space for the cat and making coffee. Everything was so smoothly done." "Well, I'm just used to doing it all the time. It's somehow interesting how there are many sides of Sate-kun that I don't know." "The feeling is mutual." "No, I mean, today was the first time we actually had the conversation." "Yeah, it's really unexpected. Who would have thought I'd end up at Sate-kun's place, enjoying coffee and having a chat together?" Although, technically speaking, it was Minamino-san who came in to drink coffee, I just accommodated. "By the way, Sate-kun, do you have any siblings?" "A little sister who's a year younger than me." "Ah, I see. That might explain why you seem so at ease talking to girls, Sate-kun." "Is that so?" "Yep." Sip. The sound of drinking coffee resonated. "Ane, you know, if you just act normally, you're actually pretty normal. It's just talking to other people's friends. You don't have to get all nervous-y. Now, why don't you let this cute little sister of yours teach you's ways?" "Indeed, I have been subjected to training sessions in conversation by my self-proclaimed cute little sister and her friends in the past. Now, I wonder if the effects of that training are starting to show." With such thoughts in mind, it's about time to move on from small talk and get to the main topic. "So, what did you want to talk about?" "Are you taking another sip of coffee?" Minamino-san hesitantly uttered her words, seemingly nervous. Hey, would you like to become friends with me?" "Well, I thought we were already friends to some extent." Disregarding our level of closeness throughout the day, we had talked quite a bit, and I had assumed we were already friends, but it seemed that wasn't the case. "No, it's not like that. I mean, being friends without having to worry about being disliked or anything like that." "Ah, I got it. You mean that you want to turn off the everybody's friend mode?" "Haha, the way you said it is funny, but well, that's pretty much it. Or rather, it's basically almost turned off now." "Ah." Minamino-san let out a stretch as she did so. The neckline of her uniform subtly accentuated her breast, drawing my attention. To divert my gaze from the magnetic pull of that sight, I pretended to check on the kitten's condition. It seemed like she desired a friendship where she didn't have to worry about pleasing others, being sensitive to the other party's facial expression or be conscious of the influence they had on one another. Perhaps she was longing for a relationship that should naturally exist between friends. Sure. Wait. No, that's quite not right. Should I say, "Minamino-san, please be friends with me instead"? Here I go again, getting involved in something. Welp. It's too late to turn back now, I thought to myself. Moreover, today felt like a day of meddling. From the matter of the kitten to my comment earlier, it seemed like everyone had something to say. Hee. I guess it can't be helped. That's quite an unexpected condescending attitude. Mhee. With a mischievous expression, Minamino-san softly chuckled. "Thank you." I couldn't help but be mesmerized as she expressed her gratitude without uttering a word, simply through the movement of her lips. "Sneaky." "So, as expected, are you afraid? Afraid of being disliked?" Since I had the chance, I decided to ask. Perhaps that's what she wanted to talk about. As I mentioned earlier, it's a bit different. It might take a while to explain, but would you listen? Sure. Well, how about we prepare dinner while we talk? And since you're already here, why don't you eat too? If it's going to be a long conversation, by the time we finish talking, we'll probably be hungry. Moreover, for some reason, I felt like it would be better to prepare dinner and talk while facing each other at the table rather than just talking. So you ask me a question and then say that? I'm trying to have a serious conversation here, you know? It's not appropriate to talk while doing something else. Wait, did you say dinner? You're the one cooking? Well, I'd love to eat, but I asked the question as a formality. Besides, you know they say a hungry stomach can't concentrate, right? Don't worry, I always listen to the radio while cooking, so I can pay attention to our conversation. I hope you won't treat my attempt to gather courage and share something with you as background noise on the radio. With a slight pout, Minamino-san started sharing her past as I headed towards the kitchen. Chapter 6. Minamino Chinatsu had been cute since she was a child. Neither her parents nor her grandparents had any foreign blood, but her features were so well defined that they seemed to carry a hint of Eastern European ancestry. In fact, she had even been scouted as a model several times and had appeared in magazines. Back in elementary school, I was surprisingly tall for my age, and it seemed that they also had these expectations of me becoming a tall model and all. However, my growth spurt came to a halt during middle school, so I ended up quitting. And as she transitioned from elementary school to middle school, many boys, who had also started awakening many things, started to notice her, resulting in confessions from them left and right. Well, I can understand why. She was not only cute but also naturally outgoing and cheerful, and with the added bonus of being a former model, it's no wonder she gained popularity. Although some girls felt jealous, as she grew up, her beauty increased, not to mention her pleasant personality. Moreover, she excelled in both academics and sports. Faced with such an all-rounded girl with no apparent flaws, many girls were unable to exploit any openings, opting instead to pursue a path of friendship rather than rivalry. Well, I can't say there weren't any instances of bullying or teasing, but back then, it didn't really bother me much. I had more of a bring-it-on kind of attitude. Furthermore, amidst the storm of confessions, she was even forced to try dating a few boys at the suggestion of her past female friends. Now that I think about it, even though it's quite a bit of me to say this, but I was quite popular back then, so I guess I wanted to quickly try being with someone. I was told things like, you might start liking them if you give it a try, and, being someone who had no romantic experience, I thought maybe that's how it worked and decided to give it a shot. However, there was absolutely no sign of any romantic feelings developing on my part. There were also times when, even though the other party is known for being a pleasant handsome guy or someone who is sincere and faithful, whether they were a senior, a classmate, or a high school student, they would quickly become pushy as soon as we were alone together. It made me wonder, weren't we supposed to take it slow and start as friends like what they told me when they confessed? Well, they were healthy teenage boys. Obviously, I don't think any middle school teenage boys would be able to resist their desires when they have a beautiful girl like her as their girlfriend. But you know, it's quite rude to keep rejecting those advances when you're in a relationship, and it will end up very troublesome for myself since I didn't really want to force myself into such things either. So we ended up breaking up. I went through that cycle several times. With that, rumors started to spread. They started calling Minamino Chinatsu a boy switcher bitch who changed boyfriends one after the other. As she had attended a combined middle and high school, her relationships extended beyond grade levels, and naturally, there were plenty of malicious gossips. Honestly, it was frustrating. When I didn't have a boyfriend, they would release this kind of pressure where they wanted me to be with someone quickly, and they would recommend me guys like they were pointing fingers randomly. Still, boys being the boys they are, they would all get hyped up and confess. If they had approached me seriously, I would have had to consider it. But it took up my lunch breaks and after school time. So, at some point, I just started declining them outright. As a result, she gained enemies out of jealousy and spite. Still, she managed to have a reasonably good time, until a certain point, as the balance began to shift. Minamino-san at the time failed to realize it. I had a best friend, you know. She was petite, cute, excelled in studies, and was kind. She was a serious girl who even served as the class representative. When we became desk neighbors, she didn't care about the bad rumors surrounding me at all. Thanks to that, I was able to have fun somehow because she was there, or at least that's what I thought. With a melancholic tone, Minamino-san spoke. I couldn't see her face, but I thought it was better that I was facing away from her. Then, suddenly, she said something to me. "Don't steal my crush, my boyfriend." "Chinatsu-chan, you already have everything, don't you? Why do you have to take what's mine?" Naturally, Minamino-san had no memory of stealing anyone's boyfriend. She hadn't even intended to be especially close with her best friend's boyfriend, but they had talked fairly often just because he was her best friend's boyfriend. At that time, Minamino-san didn't wear her mask, and she felt secure since he was her best friend's boyfriend. But that didn't go well. The beautiful girl who turns down various confessions from boys and hardly talks to any boys, was only talking to me. Her best friend's boyfriend, caught in that misunderstanding, fell for Minamino Chinatsu without a second thought. "I fell in love with Chinatsu. So let's break up," he told me. Why are you ogling other people's boyfriend? You've already stolen boyfriends from various people, and you're even including me?" I wanted to say, "I don't know what you're talking about." Or rather, I did say it. "But, you know," she continued, "the quiet girl who cried miserably after losing her boyfriend was in the right, while the beautiful and flashy girl, who wasn't crying, was in the wrong." Moreover, afterward, when her best friend's boyfriend became single, he confessed to her behind the school building. Of course, she turned him down. However, "Why? I broke up for your sake, for you. Quit giving me mixed signals and saying suggestive things. Don't fuck with me. Stop falling for me on your own and talking nonsense." He got very angry and pinned her down, where they ended up in a scuffle. She barely escaped when a patrolling teacher came to their rescue. Then yeah, I guess I was saved, but the teacher knew about the rumors too. He even told me the words "learn your lesson and start treating people properly." At that point, something inside me snapped. And from then on, Minamino-san treated everyone equally. She didn't date, and whether someone was handsome or introverted, she interacted with everyone without distinction. If someone seemed to dislike her, she would approach them regardless of gender and try to become friends to some extent. However, she didn't make any more boyfriends or best friends. Still, she didn't want to stay at that school anymore. Even though she treated everyone equally, there were still people she didn't want to talk to ever again, which created differences. Above all, she was tired of rumors and relationships. She didn't think she could put up with going from middle school to high school in that place. So, normally people go on to high school through same school admission, but I persuaded my parents to let me take the entrance exam for my current high school. I also considered all girls' schools, but that felt like running away in a sense, so I chose a co-ed school where the academic load wasn't too heavy and it was easy to commute from home. Despite being tired from all that, you're still popular even in high school. As I turned round and placed the prepared dishes on the table, Minamino-san gave me a wry smile. "That's true, but it's been quite overwhelming than I thought during the entrance ceremony. I stood out more than I expected, and it's a bit difficult to step back now." So, when you told me that earlier, it felt like some of the tension I had built up was released. This is also the first time I've ever talked about this to someone. Do you feel a bit refreshed? Yeah. Also, your cooking's impressive. There isn't just one side dish, but there are miso marinated mackerel, ginger pork, salad, and even miso soup as well. Except for the salad, everything else is just thawed from the freezer. Plus, the miso soup is an instant. So I can assure you of the taste. After eating this, take a bath and go to bed. Also, of course I'll listen to your story, we're friends after all. Yeah, thanks, Minamino-san replied meekly, as if a weight had been lifted off from her shoulders. Chapter 7. Minamino Chinatsu walked all the way to the station alone. Satou-kun, the male student who had been with her until a moment ago, offered to walk her to the station. However, she declined since she felt like walking alone. Today has been quite an eventful day. Although earlier this morning, I felt fed up about everything, and honestly, I still feel that way. I feel strangely light now. Section. For Minamino Chinatsu, today marked what could easily be described as the worst beginning of her life. Though she had known it was coming, she officially learned about her parents' divorce in the morning. Her father had already left home a long time ago and hadn't been around since spring. She had vaguely known that the reason for the divorce was her father's affair. Her mother talked mostly about alimony and ensuring Chinatsu's child support. Her mother, who used to prioritize family above all else, had easily discarded her husband and child, while her father, who abandoned them, also talked mostly about money, and Chinatsu, who couldn't say anything, had grown fed up about everything. Driven by impulse, she had left her mother at home and headed to school. Wearing her uniform, she naturally put on her usual mask when she arrived at the station where the school was located. No matter how tough things got, she could still play the role of Minamino Chinatsu. She had become like that. She was a cheerful girl who was unable to ignore those in need. Although it wasn't that she didn't want to talk to boys, she only maintained friendships and didn't seek getting into romantic relationships. Sometimes she was asked for her contact information, but she would always stubbornly refuse, saying she would only save her future boyfriend's number on her phone. She was aware that this made her seem like she had very high standards. But rather than pursuing her own romance, she made it clear she was here to support her friends' romantic relationships, appealing to them that she didn't want to be their rivals. Since nobody knew about her middle school days, life was much easier compared to back then. But sometimes, she couldn't help but wonder, where can I become my true self? If I can't even be myself at home, where should I become myself? Feeling emotionally drained from what happened in the morning, she used an errand assigned by her teacher as an excuse to head home alone. Taking the path by the park was a whim. Maybe she didn't want to go straight home, but she had to go home. With those mixed feelings, she started walking toward the station and then took a side road. Meow. That's when she heard a faint, pleading meow section. Walking while reminiscing, just a little, really just a bit, her heart seemed to be beating louder than usual. Perhaps, or maybe it's quite possible, that it's because of him, the first male student to be registered on Chinatsu's messaging app, after she completely reset her relationship upon entering high school. He wasn't number 2 at all. He, himself, and those around him had accepted that, but he was sometimes called by that nickname. In the first place, she didn't call boys by nicknames unless it had naturally spread enough that it would sound unnatural not to call them that, but she had grown tired of using that term. She didn't have romantic feelings for him. It wasn't like she found him particularly good-looking. He doesn't even dye his hair or have a messy appearance. He had ordinary hair and an ordinary face. He seemed like the kind of person who would blend into a crowd and become invisible. Well, she didn't dislike him, though. But even before all that, there was the matter of her middle school days and her parents. Understanding the concept of liking was something Chinatsu often struggled with, especially when it concerned herself. More importantly, it felt liberating to be allowed to be herself and not be disliked for it. Venting her frustrations, eating together until she was full. It felt like her body had become lighter, not just her mind. In addition, at that moment, when she saw the abandoned white kitten, she had felt an inexplicable connection. While thinking, "I want to help the kitten," she instead shouted, "Help me!" Even though she knew that no one would actually come to her aid. But he came. In the midst of her overwhelming feeling of emptiness, he had found her sitting there. They hadn't interacted much before, but he did various things for her. He had removed the mask she had been hiding behind, allowed her to pour out her feelings, and even cooked her a meal, filling her stomach. "It's like he picked me up along with the kitten, too," she mumbled softly and blushed at her own words. Continuing at a brisk pace, she headed to the station. She was glad she had declined his offer to see her off. Being alone felt right. Once on the train, she opened her smartphone and launched the messaging app. "Minamino, thanks for today. I arrived at the station safely and got on the train." "Sate, glad to hear that." The response came quickly, even though the messages were short. She thought he might have waited without taking a bath. She found herself slightly smiling at the idea. "Minamino, by the way, what should we name the kitten?" "Minamino, should Sate decide?" 2 stops worth of conversation. "Sate, I thought we were just looking after it temporarily, so I didn't think about naming it." "Minamino, but won't it be troublesome to call it without a name?" Is it still sleeping? Sate. It's sleeping. Sate, the kitten's name. Huh. Still, since Minamino found it, you should name it Minamino. Okay, but I hope you think about some names too, Sate. Let's tell each other what we've thought of tomorrow. They had asked each other to drop the honorific when addressing each other, effectively removing san. It happened at the doorstep when they exchanged contact information. Looking for the kitten's owner and maintaining their distance within the class seemed beneficial for both of them. If they were going to keep in touch, having each other's contact information was an absolute necessity, so she had asked him herself. Come to think of it, this was the first time she had asked for others' contact information before others asked for hers. Perhaps those who had asked her for her contact details had felt nervous just like her. That was what she thought as she lifted her face from her smartphone, gazing out of the train window at the passing cityscape. Chapter 8. I woke up to the sound of my smartphone's vibration. I'm fairly consistent with waking up, so I could tell that it was earlier than usual. Minamino, good morning. Are you up? Have you thought of a name? As expected, it was an unusually early hour. Most of the people who contact me, whether from my part-time job or circle, tend to be night owls. It was a fresh experience to receive messages in the morning. After what happened, I found exchanging contact infos with other guys really troublesome, so you're actually the first guy I've exchanged contact infos with since entering high school. Yeah, got your ID. Don't sell mine, okay? Though, if you did, you might get a good price for it. I recalled the conversation we had when we exchanged contact information, even though she declined my offer to send her off to the station. And now that she mentioned it, I remembered the kitten. No wonder I was sleeping on the living room sofa. After our talk yesterday, the kitten had only woken up once to use the litter box. I watched a bit nervously, but it seemed like it was only peeing, which relieved me. If, by any chance, it hadn't peed or seemed weak, I was told by the veterinarian the other day to bring it in. Afterwards, the kitten continued sleeping. I found myself looking at my smartphone absent-mindedly, and before I knew it, I had spent the night in the living room. Nevertheless, I couldn't just skip school because of it. Of course, the general consensus online was that as long as there's food, water, and a clean litter box, it's fine. But today, I have a part-time job outside of school in addition to classes. Even though I temporarily agreed to take care of the kitten, I had no idea how well it would do on its own. A wet sensation pressed against the palm of my hand as I had it hanging down from the sofa. Though I couldn't be certain, I was told that the kitten was about 4 months old and was probably disciplined. The kitten was likely bought from a pet shop and was then thrown immediately. I couldn't understand it myself. But there are people who, after spending a lot of money to buy a pet, end up discarding them because they feel it wasn't the same as they imagined. Nevertheless, regardless of those people's circumstances, the white kitten that was currently rubbing her head against my hand, making purring sounds, was very cute. Good morning. Although it will only be for a while, let's get along well. I had heard that cats were solitary creatures, but this kitten was surprisingly friendly. On a whim, I took a photo and replied with the message, "It's in good health," but still no name. A reply came back immediately, "Minamino, so cute, Minamino. I'm so jealous you get to see a kitten in the morning." Minamino. Oh, by the way, I sent the photo we took of the kitten yesterday to a few people who might be interested. Seeing the response, I hesitated a little, then turned my attention to the kitten next to me. Just as I was about to send another reply, another message arrived, causing me to pause mid-typing. Minamino. Hey, if I came to see the kitten again today, would that be annoying? It's possible she was typing in between things. However, there was something about the timing of the first 3 messages being sent quickly, followed by this slightly delayed one. It gave off a tentative atmosphere, and I found myself looking up at the ceiling for some reason. Think, feel, and decide. Sate, I have something I want to ask you. Section. I'm really happy that I can see Shiro-chan anytime, but never would I have thought that we'd be at the point of having duplicate keys just on the second day we met. We're not really at the second day of meeting, and there are circumstances. Please don't phrase it in a way that implies there's something. After school, I sat on the sofa in my living room, holding the kitten, while Minamino relaxed beside me. By the way, is it fine with your friends? While getting ready to head out, I asked her that question. I wonder if it was alright for her to go home alone yesterday. Well, I assume it's alright, but I told them I was taking care of a kitten due to family-related reasons. I can see you're quite skilled in mixing truths with lies. Yeah, well. By the way, Sate, can I ask you something as well? As she said that, she turned her head toward me and asked if it's something I can answer. Say, do you live alone, Sate? Yeah. I see. Well, that's to be expected. I mean, it's understandable that you're entrusted with keys and all since you only meet your parents seldomly. I also know a friend who still accompanies their mom during their parents' business trips. So, is there some family situation going on with Satou? Sort of. That's why I'm hoping you can look after the kitten during my work shifts. Feel free to watch TV or play games. Just please don't enter other rooms other than the living room, bathroom, or washroom. Are you not going to include your room to rooms that I can enter? Hey, by the way, do you do the classic thing of hiding stuff under your bed? Don't even think about trying to enter a wholesome high school boy's room. And no, I don't hide stuff under my bed. I don't need to say what stuff refers to, but yes, there's nothing under my bed, although I don't know what stuff might be hidden within my PC and smartphone. Well, jokes aside, I promise not to do anything weird, alright? Still, is it fine? Even though we're classmates, you're entrusting a stranger you've just met with a key. I suppose this is the main point of discussion. I shifted my gaze back to the kitten, stroking it slowly as Minamino asked, I'd like to ask you the same. Are you fine with entering the home of a guy you've just met, who also lives alone, just to take care of a kitten? Responding to a question with a question. I like to think I have a good sense for people. Well, although I made a big mistake in middle school, I'm trying to be more careful now. What a coincidence. I also like to think I have a good sense for people. Hee hee. Ha ha. We laughed together, feeling somewhat embarrassed. You mentioned a part-time job, right? Where is it? Also, isn't it against school rules to have a job nowadays? To be precise, you can have a part-time job if you have a valid reason and permission. I got permission when I entered school. I also avoid working near the station. You knows that supermarket and yakitori restaurant down the park? I work at the izakaya there. Since I'm a high school student, I can only work until 10 p.m. I see. Are you a hall staff? Both drinks and kitchen staff. I do some cooking too. So, that's why you can cook. Huh. Looking at it this way, we really don't know anything about each other, do we? Well, we'll gradually get to know each other as we go, right? I guess you're right. Still, seems like you're a bit unsatisfied. Oh, but I have to head out soon. Sorry, but when you go back home, could you please check the food and water, and make sure to lock up? HMPH. I feel like I'm being left behind, but I can't help it if you have a part-time job. We'll continue this another time. It seems like she plans to continue from where we left off. As I dealt with Minamino, who had taken off her usual mask and began to show her spoiled side while making jokes with double meaning, I opened the door of the living room to head to work. Take care, Minamino called out to me as I was about to leave. Yeah, I'm off. Come to think of it, I wonder when was the last time someone saw me off when I went outside? Did I sound embarrassed when I said that? I thought, and then, over a few days after that, we gradually started learning more about each other. Chapter 9. About 2 weeks had passed since I picked up the kitten. Even though we spent some time together, my relationship with Minamino at school didn't really change. We continued on as usual, with no real connection to begin with. However, on a certain day, it was a little different. Now, that concludes homeroom. I apologize for this, but there's a minor task that needs to be done. It'll take about 30 minutes. Can the 2 students who's on class duty today, later on, come to the staff room, after homeroom? Our homeroom teacher, Gondu, said to me and another female student. Well, it's a bit of a hassle, but if it's just fate playing its part, I guess there's no avoiding it. Today's Friday, and even though I had work at 6 p.m., I still had some time. I nodded in agreement with that thought, and then I noticed the other girl looking at me. It was Horikita Masami. If I remember correctly, I've heard she's on the girls' volleyball team, tall, and people have high hopes for her future. Sorry, sensei. I have club activities, so it might be a bit tough for me. I see. Well, that can't be helped then. But leaving it to just one person is a bit much. Is there anyone else I can ask? It's doubtful anyone would volunteer when asked like that, or so I thought as gone to scan the entire class. I didn't really have any close friends who would get involved in this kind of situation. While I wasn't sure what the task was, I felt like this was something I could handle on my own if I tried. As I was thinking that, then, since I'm in the Go Home Club, I can do it. I heard a familiar voice. Startled, I looked over and saw Minamino raising her hand. Minamino. Huh? Well, then, I'll leave it to you two. Can you come to the staff room? I'll give you the key to the reference room. I just want you to clean it up and let some air in. Yes, sir. Saying that, Minamino gave me a quick glance and left. Hey, number 2, you lucked out. How about it? If it's with Minamino, I wouldn't mind switching places. As I was about to grab my bag and stand up, a teasing remark came from the front row. It was Ishizawa from the soccer team, who had dyed his hair slightly brown. He often hung out with other sports club members and was frequently seen interacting with Minamino. Honestly, dealing with him one way or another was a hassle. Yeah, that's true. Well, it might be a bit troublesome, but I'll go since it's got its perks. I shrugged and replied, causing him to make a somewhat dissatisfied expression. Maybe he was expecting the words "okay, let's switch." Although a week ago, I might have said something like that. I couldn't do that now. That's because my pocket had vibrated twice to indicate incoming messages. I knew without looking. It was Minamino. If Ishizawa went in my place, I don't know what she might tell me later. Through our exchanges over the past few days, I had come to understand Minamino to some extent. What? Are you trying to get in on Minamino too? She's got a strong guard, you know. It's not like that. But well, I'm also in the Go Home Club, just so you know. You do your best with your club activities too. TCH, being in the Go Home Club must be nice. You've got plenty of free time. Although, if he found out that we'd been messaging almost every day and even had dinner together a few times, I wonder what kind of expression would he make? Feeling a slightly dark sense of superiority, I shook my head at myself and left the classroom. As expected, Minamino was waiting for me just outside. You're late. She pouted slightly and muttered softly. I got caught up by a certain someone's fan. As I answered, just to be sure, I took out my smartphone and checked. As expected, it was a message from the beautiful girl right in front of me. Minamino, first natural interaction achieved. Minamino, still not here? I'm waiting, so let's go together. It wouldn't look weird if it's because of a school duty. I think it felt unnatural though. No way. Well, I thought it was natural for either no one to raise their hand, and I do it alone, or someone reluctantly gets chosen. Even your friends were looking at you with that expression. While walking down the corridor towards the staff room, Minamino continued to be approached by various people, and as they glanced at me with a hint of curiosity, Minamino would just shrug and say, "We've been called to the staff room for class duties," as they nod in understanding before walking away. Honestly, it's a short distance that I wouldn't normally encounter anyone if I were alone. Yet Minamino's popularity struck me once again. Even from my perspective, knowing the situation, her demeanor seemed incredibly natural. The feeling of freedom. No, let's start cleaning. The reference room was a corner room next to the staff room on the second floor. Quite a few printouts were piled up, and the curtains seemed a bit dusty. Amidst that, Minamino seemed to be having quite a bit of fun. Her tone of voice didn't change, but there was a different vibe about her. How does it feel to be alone in a closed room with a beautiful girl after school? Yeah, it's probably just as exciting as being alone at home with a beautiful girl. Wait, then isn't it just the same as usual? On the contrary, why did you think this would be more exciting? Oh, The shredders are here. There are two, so you can use that one, Minamino. By the way, they know there are shredding services they can hire, right? Instead of asking students, they could just ask a professional. Oh, look at this. It's the misprint from the recent short quiz. Admittedly, it seemed like a difficult task for one person. However, it appeared that Minamino wasn't pleased with my attitude, and that showed in her behavior. I expressed my dissatisfaction. Well, not just her behavior, she stated it clearly. Let's finish this quickly and go home. Dissatisfied. I'm dissatisfied. Ah, then what do you want me to do? Seeing Minamino puff up her cheeks and appeal to me, I gave in and turned around. Even with that expression, she still looked attractive. It made me feel the difference at a genetic level. Geez, you're such a killjoy. Imagine, when a boy and a girl with a hidden connection end up naturally alone together in school. It's like something out of a story, right? You know what I mean? Ah, so what you're saying is, you want to be seen as the beautiful heroine of a story. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now that I think about it, you've already gone through the jealousy event in our class. Why, you've got it wrong, alright? Don't interpret it weirdly. I mean, sure, I put in effort every day, but... Wait, jealousy event? What's that? After being accused of being a killjoy, I tried to playfully respond based on the light novels that came to mind. Although, the girl named Minamino does fit the description of a popular beautiful girl in our grade. But, well, Minamino seemed more concerned about the jealousy event, and she looked at me with a puzzled expression and asked. Well, Ishizawa sort of tried to find fault and implied to switch places with me, I guess. Ishizawa, huh? His attention does seem to be directed my way sometimes. I mean, he looks directly at my chest or legs sometimes, and honestly, I'm not really comfortable with it. Even though we talk often due to our positions. I see. I get why people gives her those stares, but when I imagine it happening to me, it does make me a bit uncomfortable. I mean, I don't plan on giving her disrespectful looks or anything, though, but you didn't switch, so thanks. Well, you know, if I had switched in that situation, wouldn't Minamino have gotten mad? Well, yeah, obviously. I'd be like, for what reason did you think I volunteered to replace Masami? That's what I'm saying. Hee. As we chatted, we smoothly fed papers into the shredder, and Minamino seemed to be in high spirits. I also found these casual conversations quite enjoyable. Chapter 10. I could have gone back together with Minamino, but since I did not want to draw too much attention, I had her return to the classroom first, before I returned the key to the staff room, and then headed back to the classroom myself. While I had brought my bag, I realized I had forgotten a book in my desk. Minamino had mentioned that she was going shopping with friends on her way home, so since she couldn't come today, I wanted to read at home during the time before my part-time job. Even though it was after school, the task took only about 20 minutes, and there were still plenty of students around. Just as I was thinking of quickly grabbing my book and heading home, I heard my name from the classroom. I stopped in my tracks just before entering. Too bad. If it were the real Satou instead of number 2, I would have been happy to go. Sorry, Chinatsu. I never thought you would be the one to take my place instead. Huh? It's fine, but wait. Didn't you say you had club activities, Masami? Horikita-san, who was supposed to do the class duties with me but switched with another because of her club activities, was in the classroom with 3 other girls. Minamino, who had returned to pick up her belongings, was there as well, engaging in a conversation. I probably should have just entered the classroom without worrying about it. However, for some reason, I found myself stopping in my tracks. Well, today is a day for self-practice, so I thought I could wait a bit longer. You know, I didn't want to get injured doing cleaning right before practice, and I've never talked to number 2 before, so it would be awkward. Sigh. Well, it's fine. Also, it's Satou-kun, okay? He doesn't really like that way of addressing him. He's a good person, you know? He's also very gentle. There it is. Chinatsu and her good person talk again. You always say it, but you don't really fall for anyone. But yeah, I might have worded it poorly. It's not like I think badly of Sate-kun from our class, though. Still, if you compare him with Class D's Sate, the latter is literally quite the catch. Not only is he good-looking, the ace of the basketball team, he also excels in studies. He's like a real-life Superman, right? The surrounding girls followed along as well. Well, I suppose that can't be helped. But I missed the timing to enter, and as I was about to move away from the classroom door, the continuation of their conversation caught my attention, and I stopped again. Still, Minamino is really kind, huh? But being kind to a plain guy like number 2 might make him fall for you, you know? I bet the task was boring for you, right? Did you manage to avoid being ogled at? It was Ishizawa. He was trying to join the girls' conversation at just the right moment. Wasn't he supposed to be heading to his club activities? It's not number 2, it's Sate-kun. And I don't think that's the case at all. We were talking just now, and it was fun, and he seemed like a gentleman. Minamino cut off Ishizawa, her expression invisible, but I could tell she wasn't smiling. Ishizawa was the type to often make fun of people he thought were beneath him. Now, I'm telling you all guys are like that. Taciturn. Plus, didn't number 2 acknowledge it himself too? He played basketball since middle school, but he quit and joined the go-home club when Sate from Class D joined. Sure enough, when Sate became the freshman's ace, he chose to step back and settled with being the number 2. And then, perhaps feeling awkward about his failed attempt at humor or frustrated by how who he considered beneath him, was being supported by Minamino, he began to speak in that manner. While I momentarily considered retorting with a sharp comment, more striking to me than his choice of words was Minamino's unexpectedly icy reply directed at Ishizawa. So? Did Sate-kun himself say that? Even without seeing her expression, I could tell Minamino was angry. Huh? Well, no, he didn't. But, trying to somehow bridge the conversation, Ishizawa seemed to have intended it as a light-hearted topic of laughter. However, he appeared somewhat intimidated by the drastic change in Minamino's atmosphere. Then what? Is Ishizawa an esper or something, able to receive Sate-kun's inner thoughts? Is that what you're saying? Well, no, I don't have any special powers like that, but you know, number 2 was pretty good at basketball in middle school, even though he was in a different school. He was on the basketball team, so I knew him. It's just hard to believe that a guy like that wouldn't join the basketball team here. I mean, losing in looks or academics is one thing, but losing even in his strong suit, basketball, would be too much for his pride to handle. Right? It's like that concept of circumstantial evidence, you know? He still managed to say it with a grin, whether due to lack of imagination or inability to read the atmosphere. But either way, in this situation, it was an unwise move against Minamino. I see, I get it, but you know, there could be other reasons for him quitting, right? Maybe it was due to an injury, or family circumstances, who knows? Well, I don't know much about it either, but I had fun talking to Sate-kun normally. It's just a bit uncomfortable to hear someone badmouth someone you were just with a moment ago, you know? Minamino replied as such. Well, I might not have much say in this matter considering I skipped the class duties. I still think you might have gone too far with that. As Minamino's attitude shifted, the atmosphere in the room began to lean towards thinking that Ishizawa had gone a bit too far. Following suit, Horikito also joined in, and Ishizawa left his seat with an awkward expression. I rushed into the boys' restroom, trying to avoid running into anyone coming out, and looked up at the ceiling. Minamino was being an idiot. She should have just ignored it. She didn't need to put the position she had built at risk for someone like me. I muttered those thoughts to myself. I bet her hate control slipped up earlier, but despite saying those words, I couldn't help but feel an inexplicable sense of happiness. Chapter 11. On the Saturday following the day I overheard their conversation after school, Minamino sent me a message in the early afternoon and came into the living room as if she were familiar with the place. This was actually the first time she had come over on a day off. The kitten temporarily named Shiro was sleeping. Or rather, it seemed to spend most of its time sleeping. I wondered if kittens were really supposed to sleep this much. Occasionally, I'd lean in with concern, and it would open its eyes as if sensing my presence, making a slight purring sound. It was a discovery for me that it made more purring sounds than meowing. Whether I was studying, eating, or playing games, Shiro was mostly sleeping. In other words, the time Minamino was around was mostly time spent with just her and me. However, strangely enough, I didn't find it uncomfortable or strange. I thought about it a bit, but, she said while still keeping her eyes on the screen, she was playing an action RPG that's been going on for over 30 years, where a red-haired protagonist, beloved by all kinds of disasters, was wielding a sword. I had already beaten the game once, but now I was watching Minamino, who had taken an interest in it. And watching her play the 8th installment of the series, my personal favorite, turned out to be surprisingly enjoyable. The two of us are friends, right? I guess we are? That's good. Still, it feels like I'm the only one sharing secrets and true feelings. I don't think it's like that, though. I sort of understood why she suddenly brought up that topic. I scratched my head, feeling a bit awkward. Stop using onomatopoeia like stare while keeping your eyes on the game. It's funny, perhaps, even if jokingly. It took some courage for Minamino to express herself this way. I even shared embarrassing stuff that happened while I was still in middle school, yet it feels like Sate hasn't opened up to me at all. Ah, so you mean wanting to know more about me is a sign of affection, huh? I guess it's finally my turn to be popular. Hey, don't get ahead of yourself. But, well, you're not wrong about me wanting to know a bit more about you, I guess. Hey, don't just stay quiet. I get a little thrown off when you suddenly show me your honest side. In a somewhat light-hearted tone, she gently tested the waters to see how far she could go. In response, I put on a casual tone and assured her that it was fine. After such a jab-like exchange, she gradually started opening up more honestly, revealing her true feelings. This had been the trend with Minamino, the girl I had spent these past few days with. That's not fair, you know. Not fair? You know a lot about me, but there's not much I know about you. My name is Satou Hajime. Somehow, there's a super good-looking guy with the same name as me in a different class at the same high school. I live alone and work part-time at an izakaya. Lately, a popular girl from my class has been coming over to my place. Just hearing the last part sounds like you're already a winner. Wait. No, I mean, there's no new info similar to what I shared with you and all that. After saying that, she paused the game, turned to where I was, and locked gazes with me. Hey, what? Since she was looking at me, I put down my smartphone that I had been idly looking at and answered. I heard this from a certain source, but did you use to play basketball? From the fact that she referred to it as from a certain source, and since I knew what had happened in the classroom, including her reaction, I was in a bit of a dilemma. Nonetheless, I nodded, perhaps due to my visible look of dilemma at her sudden question. Minamino hurriedly added, no, I mean, I'm not saying you can't have your own secrets. I was just curious about why you stopped. If you have any intention to continue, and stuff like that. I mean, you've never really talked to me about those aspects. Which is it? Minamino, who had looked so cool in the classroom, seemed a bit flustered, and she looked quite cute. Since you didn't ask me, I wouldn't just suddenly tell you. Oh, by the way, I used to play basketball in middle school. So, you would have told me if I asked? Yeah, I would have. Then, hey, why did you quit? No, I didn't quit. I'm still playing. Eh? I explained to the bewildered Minamino. She probably assumed there were circumstances that led me to quit. I'm still playing basketball. True. I couldn't do it every day as a part of club activities because my part-time job takes priority. This is why I'm in the go-home club. Still, that doesn't mean I can only play basketball if I join the school's club. Actually, I was introduced by my senior at work to some people, and sometimes, about twice a week, I play street basketball with working adults and college students. Minamino's expression changed from a dazed one to a smile as bright as when she discovered something interesting, before saying, I want to see. Huh? This time, it was my turn to be bewildered. I'm saying I want to see where you play basketball. I can't really imagine it, and I've never seen street basketball before." Minamino's straightforward gaze made her words feel pure. I was planning to tell them I couldn't make it today. But okay, then. Want to come and watch? It's at 5 p.m. today. If it turns out boring, don't complain, okay? I'll go." With those words, I found myself agreeing, and unexpectedly, I was taking Minamino outside of our school community. Though I tried not to think too much about it, I couldn't help but think that inviting a girl to the place I play basketball seemed to suggest some kind of special relationship. Chapter 12. Along with Minamino, who seemed to be somewhat in an excited mood, I arrived at the place I had been coming to for the past year. This place had a darts bar as well, and it had 2 courts and also served light meals. It was a gathering spot for basketball enthusiasts in this town. As we entered through the door, a few familiar faces noticed us and greeted us. They were older brothers in their 20s and 30s who worked nearby and lived around here. They first glanced at me, then looked puzzledly at Minamino beside me, and then turned their heads toward me at an almost comical speed, as if their heads were creaking. Are you saying Hajime brought a girl with him, huh? Isn't she incredibly cute? Is she a high schooler? Damn, it's a real high school girl." The information that I had brought a girl, especially a stunningly beautiful one, seemed to spread to the people on the back court in no time. On Saturdays, various people, from working adults to college students, gathered here. Though street basketball came in various forms, this place had a certain organization to it, and there were many friendly people. Above all, unlike within the high school, there was no weird caste system here. Instead, what mattered was your basketball skills, how much you loved basketball, and whether you were simply a good person. While the conversations could be crude and straightforward, and the crowd somewhat rough, this place was comfortable for me, and even now, people were approaching us one after another, probably welcoming us so that Minamino, who came here for the first time, wouldn't feel out of place. I'm surprised. Is she really your girlfriend? You didn't hire a model or anything, right? I never expected Hajime to bring a girl. Good evening, girlfriend. How's it going? Want to get to know each other better? Why don't you scan this QR code on your messaging app as a sign of us becoming an acquaintance? Me too. All right, I decided I won't give you a single good spot to shoot today. Damn, showing off like that. Perhaps, hopefully, they weren't just crowding around because she's cute. Minamino looked a bit tense, so I grabbed her wrist and pulled her closer to me. All right, you guys, don't go around hitting on her. Besides, you've got a girlfriend, don't you? I'll tell on you. And seriously, crowding around a high school girl? I might report you to the cops. For now, I ignored the still grinning adults and walked toward the door at the back, making my way to a relatively safe spot. Sorry about that, Minamino. I'll introduce you to some safer people here. Oh, okay. I had held her wrist amid the commotion, but I hoped she'd understand the situation and forgive me. With that thought in mind, I walked together with Minamino to where a particular couple was waiting. One was a man with a cleanly shaved head and rugged facial features, a giant in a sense. Honestly, I didn't know exactly what he did for work. I was too intimidated to ask, but what I did know was that despite his imposing appearance, he was actually gentle and surprisingly agile. The other was a slim, elegant woman. The contrast was stark, making it easy to miss. But she was quite tall for a woman. Known as the Beauty and the Beast duo, they were the owners of this place and also the organizers of the street basketball circle. The woman was also the older sister at the senior co-worker who brought me to this place last spring. Good evening, Yoji-san, and Misaki-san. I've brought a friend along today, and since it might get too noisy over there, could I leave her here? Is that alright? I greeted the two and introduced Minamino. Minamino, who had been introduced, quickly bowed in greeting. I'm Minamino Chinatsu. Hajime-kun and I are classmates, and he's helped me out a lot. I selfishly asked him to bring me here to watch basketball today. Nice to meet you. Good evening, Hajime-kun, and welcome, Chinatsu-chan. I heard you were getting attention at the entrance. Of course, it's fine. Shall we watch your boyfriend in action? Hajime-kun's quite impressive on the court, you know. Hey, Hajime. And nice to meet you too, miss. You're quite stunning, I must say. Hajime, there sure is more to you than meets the eye. Still, I'm glad to see that you're enjoying your youth in high school. I've got to head out for a bit, but have a good time. The two greeted Minamino with smiles, and I couldn't help but chuckle. Even though I had introduced her as my friend, it seemed like these people were really interested in high school romance drama. Hajime-kun and I aren't exactly in that kind of relationship. It's fine, it's fine. Why not chat with this Nissan here, including about that kind of stuff? Still, you young ones sure are really interesting. Huh? Misaki-san welcomed Minamino to the bench beside her and started chatting right away. Given Misaki-san's exceptional communication skills and Minamino's outgoing nature, I wasn't too worried about them getting along. However, a different concern crossed my mind. Well, as long as Misaki-san was with her, I was sure she wouldn't be bothered by unwanted attention. And then, as Yoji-san's smile grew narrower upon hearing Minamino's greeting, his gaze turned gently towards me. There was something ticklish about his expression. I couldn't help but laugh. Ahaha. Even though I hadn't experienced a typical high school romance, it also felt quite wrong to say I somehow ended up becoming good friends with the top beauty of our school. This is quite an unusual combination, I must say. Hajime, and over there is Minamino, I assume? While we were chatting, a voice called out from behind. Oh, right, he's here today. Although I had thought it was a 50-50 chance whether he'd come after Minamino decided to accompany me, it seemed like I lost that bet. Aizawa-kun. Minamino, who had been talking with Misaki-san, turned towards us and widened her eyes as she said his name. It made sense. Aizawa Shinji was another male student from a different class at the same high school. Although he was also well known, he had a reputation separate from Minamino's and the other Sade-kuns. In our high school, which was considered a decently advanced institution, he stood out with his gray-dyed short hair, earrings in his ears, and a necklace that dangled on his exposed neck. Despite his punk appearance, he maintained good grades, came from a well-off family in the local community, and even contributed financially to the school. That's why the teachers couldn't really interfere. He was a mix of a scholar, a son of a family with good social standing, an honor student, and a troublemaker all in one. Oh, Hajime-chi is here too. Shinji, show me something cool, okay? I'm looking forward to it. Saying that, Kana-san approached and waved at us with a fluttering hand as she casually draped her arm around Shinji's shoulders. As you might have guessed, I don't know her surname. Then, Shinji playfully tapped her seemingly recent girlfriend's shoulder and told her, "Leave it to me." As they walked over to us, her demeanor, coupled with her slender figure, has the potential to awaken the appetite of a carnivore. Shinji is popular. While his taste in women isn't the best, he often changes the ones he's seen with, according to him. He doesn't turn anyone away who comes, nor does he chase away those who leave. So, there's probably no chance that he'll approach Minamino. This could become a scoop if it's known, don't you think? Giving us a quick glance, Shinji approached us before letting out a smirk along with those words, prompting a reaction from Minamino. Aizawa-kun. In response to that, he even narrowed his eyes even more, as if teasing us before sending a questioning gaze our way. Shinji, there are special circumstances, so don't tease her too much, I replied with a sigh. Aizawa Shinji, although he was a problem child and rarely interacted with the students around the school, he was actually one of my street basketball friends. Despite what his overbearing appearance suggests, he was far from being a delinquent. It was just his fashion, influenced by his affiliation with a different hip-hop group. I knew this well. Furthermore, he was aware of my circumstances to some extent. He also knew about this place and my part-time job, as well as it being one of the reasons that contributed to my growing indifference towards how I was perceived within the school. You talking about the scoop was just a joke. Plus, I'm pretty tight-lipped, so you can relax. By the way, I thought you were just a superficial idol type, but you've got a good eye for guys. Minamino. All right, Hajime, Let's team up today and show them what we've got. Although, the older men are fired up to make sure you don't shine too much since you brought a girlfriend. Geez, I can't believe those old men are all only full of vigor at times like this. Well, even though you say that, I know you just want me to give you the good parts instead. Haha, well, it can't be helped with my position on the court. Increase your height first before complaining. Damn, what do I have to eat to grow tall like you? As our unusual back and forth banter unfolded, two people who rarely interacted at school. Minamino's stunned expression only added to the amusement. Well, even with just this, I secretly thought that bringing her along was a good idea. Chapter 13. Minamino Chinatsu couldn't take her eyes off the 2-on-2 basketball game before her, or rather, off Satou Hajime. Hajime-kun is quite something when he's playing basketball. Though she had been told that, she never really had the impression that he was particularly skilled in sports, so she thought it might just be some sort of lip service. Nevertheless, there was a part of her that had some expectations. Even though he didn't stand out, the fact that he was secretly good at basketball might be a strong point, she thought. And how right was she with that? With that sound ringing out, a not-so-tall figure dashed across the court. The opponents were a pair of what seemed to be working adults, laughing as they showed off in front of the dashing man's female companion. Both of them had a larger build, likely over 180 centimeters tall. Compared to the slim and not-so-tall Satou, it truly looked like a battle between an adult and a child. Shinji. Got it, partner. Against such opponents, Satou dribbled past them numerous times, sometimes scoring by himself, other times giving passes to Aizawa for the score. Aizawa himself executed dazzling dunks, and cheers were echoing from the bench that served as the audience. They're amazing, both of them. That's right, Hajime-kun has been playing basketball for 3 years in middle school, so he's got a solid foundation, and he's got good dribbling and passing skills. And even though the street court's hoops are set lower to make it flashier, Shinji-kun can still make it look exciting. Well, in his case, he doesn't really go all out unless there are girls around. As they conversed, on the court, Aizawa had just scored another point. Ha ha ha, you old-timers seem to lack the stamina. Huh? What? Just watch as us old-timers show our refined spirit. Seriously, both of you being high school students and bringing girls along to play basketball, it's way too enviable, you idiots. Shinji, don't provoke them too much. Senpai, you're letting your true feelings show too much. Don't push yourself too hard, or you'll end up with a sore back again, and your wife will scold you. Alright? Such exchanges could be heard from the court, as they played nearby. From the audience's seat, cheers also flew towards them. In the midst of this, Satou was seen laughing. Somehow, it felt like the Satou who was normally quiet at school was a facade, and that the real Satou was here. Hee, you seem completely focused. It's just, I'm kind of frustrated. With a slightly teasing yet gentle tone, Misaki-san spoke, and Chinatsu murmured in response. Come to think of it, she realized belatedly that she wasn't wearing her mask here at all. She had been brought here after making a selfish request. Overwhelmed at the entrance, guided while holding hands, and in the midst of it all, she found herself here in her natural state. What's Hajime-kun like at school? To be honest, he's like an inconspicuous guy. Aizawa stands out, but they don't interact at all in school. And Satou doesn't resemble what he's like here either. Plus, Satou doesn't really look like that at all, and he probably skips PE class. If he were to show what he's like here at school, he definitely wouldn't be treated so harshly. You seem to be interested in him. Despite denying it, could this be the scent of love? Geez, that's not it. But, it's somehow frustrating. Everyone here doesn't give off that vibe at all. At school, I stand out quite a bit, but Satou seems so inconspicuous. I can imagine. And even though he's actually so amazing, he handles things by himself at home, works part-time, and is unexpectedly kind despite seeming distant. His cooking is delicious too, and he's acknowledged so much here. In contrast, I'm the one who gets compliments like you are good at studying or you are cute. But honestly, I don't have much to offer. Even though Satou is actually more amazing, there are those who mock him. Yet he doesn't even bother to defend himself. Ever since we became friends, I've found myself depending on him all the time, but I can't really do much for him in return. Ah, it's that school caste thing or something, right? It's a pain, isn't it? Those sorts of things. While their conversation made Chinatsu feel somewhat tangled up, a voice interjected from the side. It was the gal like Annie-san who had been leaning on Aizawa earlier. Me too, you know. I couldn't fit in with that whole high school thing, so I ended up dropping out. But when I went outside, there was this sense of freedom that I felt. I mean, it's not like you can't survive without being good at studying. Kana-chan, despite saying that, managed to work while getting her high school equivalency and got into college. She's amazing. Misaki-san praised the gal named Kana. To be honest, it was surprising to Minamino that someone so beautiful and seemingly carefree had dropped out of high school, and that she had gone on to get her high school equivalency and enter college despite her looks. Oh, you're making such a surprised face. Ah, your name is Chinatsu-chan, right? Ah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Hee, it's fine, it's fine. I'm used to being seen as surprising. With a laugh, she seemed incredibly carefree and irresistibly charming. Then Kana continued. So, what was it again? Was there something that happened to Hajime that made him a target at school? Yeah, well, I don't really talk to Satou much at school, so our relationship isn't known, but when we got involved in a small incident, I felt something fuzzy. Well, that's an intriguing aspect of your relationship. But, well, isn't it okay? Let them say what they want, huh? You see, even though I've only gotten to know Hajime here, he's a really good guy. And he's attractive even if he's not to Shinji's level. It doesn't matter how he comes across in high school. Hajime manages to showcase his positive qualities to you, his girlfriend, and Chinatsu-chan is falling all over for him, right? No matter what others might say, it won't have any impact on your relationship or your life. Chinatsu, who had been listening, stared blankly at Kana's triumphant expression. She wanted to say that she wasn't falling for him again, and actually, she hadn't fallen for him in the first place, but somehow, Kana's words and her attitude had taken the edge off her response. Well, Kana-chan's argument might be a bit extreme, and I do think it's hard to say that the relationships within high school don't matter at all to high schoolers. But yes, there's also the fact that someone knows your real self, and just having that can make things okay. That's definitely true. Listening quietly, Misaki-san smiled gently and looked at Chinatsu. How much do you know about Hajime-kun's situation, Chinatsu-chan? Well, we've only really become close recently. I know he lives alone and works part-time, but not much else. About basketball, there's someone who knew about his middle school days in our class, so I heard it from them, and when I asked if he was still playing basketball now, he brought me here. To be exact, she had been brought here after she had selfishly asked and nagged Hajime, but she wasn't lying. I see. Then, I don't think I need to tell you about his situation. Whether he decides to share it is up to your efforts, Chinatsu-chan. But there's just one thing I want to say. Please take care of Hajime-kun. Yes, if there's something I can do. She didn't know anything. She hadn't resolved anything, but by having her story heard by this kind and beautiful Annie-san and the gal like Annie-san, Chinatsu felt like her course of action had somehow become clearer. I want to know more about him. She didn't even know if this feeling was love. She didn't want a relationship as fragile as that of her parents, but she did want to learn more about Satou. That much she knew. Darn it, we lost. I can't move anymore. Looking over, it seemed that the game had ended. The two working adults were sitting down, while the two high schoolers were high-fiving. From middle school to high school. For herself, who only knew the community of family and school, this place felt refreshing. Satou and Aizawa high-fiving. If this happened at school, it would be the talk of the day. Thinking such things, she decided to prepare drinks and towels for Satou's return. But then, she had a moment where she thought this might be a girlfriend move, shook her head to clear her thoughts, and stood up. Misaki-san, looking calmly at Chinatsu, was the only one who noticed that her cheeks were slightly flushed. Chapter 14. It was the last day of October, About 3 weeks since I temporarily took care of Shiro in my house. It was also the time when I had begun to get used to living with the kitten. And I had even started to think that it might be okay to keep Shiro with me permanently. Minamino had also been looking for someone to take in the kitten, but it was proving difficult to find someone willing. I had also consulted with Misaki-san on my end, and she had brought up a story about an acquaintance of hers, a woman who wanted to adopt a cat. However, the woman in question was living alone after losing her husband and had some mobility issues. She wondered if it would be possible to bring the cat to her condo in Mitaka since she couldn't travel far due to her limited mobility. Mitaka, huh. I had spent my middle school days in that town. It hadn't been all bad, but honestly, it wasn't a place I particularly wanted to visit now. Minamino, I see. Minamino, that's a good thing. But it's a bit lonely, isn't it? Sate, you're right. Minamino, since it will be the last time, and it's still next Saturday, I'll come with you too. When I informed Minamino earlier this morning that I had received a call from Misaki-san last night, she agreed to accompany me, just like she did last Saturday. I wonder if this means Minamino won't be coming over anymore. I did feel like I had become friends with Minamino, but now that the reason to check on Shiro was gone, it was likely that she wouldn't come to my house anymore. Thinking so as I heard the word last time, I chuckled wryly at how I felt a bit lonely. My house was a bit too spacious for just me, and the meals ended up being too much. There was no I'm home or welcome back in my life. In the midst of such a life, I had taken in the kitten, feeling like I was helping, and in a way, I might have been saved by Minamino. Oh well, this kind of thinking won't do. Maybe I should go for a jog. I had a bit of time before school. While it crossed my mind that I might break a sweat on the way, I thought it would be better to forget about everything by jogging, rather than letting my thoughts wander in the wrong direction. Section. It was a beautiful autumn day with gentle and pleasant weather. Holding Shiro's cage, I got onto the train at Toyoda Station at the appointed time. It was around 11 a.m. on a holiday, so the train wasn't too crowded, making me spot Minamino quickly. Wow, not bad at all. You're looking sharp and quite handsome today. I couldn't wear my school uniform, but I also couldn't dress too casually, as I was going to an elder woman's house. I wore a formal, thin black jacket with cream-colored slacks. Still, I couldn't help but gaze at Minamino as she said those compliments, watching her hold onto the handrail near the door. She was wearing a calm-colored dress today. It wasn't a flashy outfit, and it didn't expose too much skin. Yet, I couldn't take my eyes off Minamino. With a touch of light makeup, her own beauty stood out. Maybe it was because I had entertained strange thoughts like feeling lonely recently, but honestly, it was the first time I had been so captivated by someone's appearance. Sate, huh? Is there something strange about me? I mean, I've tried to put myself together nicely, hoping not to create a bad first impression, considering that I'm meeting someone who's taking in Shiro-chan. Sorry. I was just mesmerized by how beautiful. No, it's nothing. I just thought it suits you well. In response to my words that slipped out with a hint of honesty, Minamino formed a smile that could only be described as playful. With that smile, my heartbeat skipped a bit as her beauty transitioned into cuteness. As I was searching for an excuse, the doors closed with the sound of departure, and the train began to move. Then, Minamino sidled up beside me, peering into my face and teasingly said, "Oh, I see. I'm kind of glad that Sate was mesmerized by me. I mean, I also thought I had a decent appearance to some extent, but even when we were at your house, you weren't really paying attention to me. I even started to suspect if maybe you weren't interested in girls. So instead of losing confidence in your own appearance, you're doubting my sexual orientation instead." Classic Minamino. I mean, it's hard not to be conscious about my own looks when I've been made aware of it by others since I was a child. You too, Sate. I mean, you have a unique charm and I think it's good. If I were to compare it to a seasoning, it's like salt, adds a nice flavor. I wasn't giving you a compliment or putting you down, and I'm not asking for consolation either. So could you stop with that follow-up? Ha ha ha. Although, I wouldn't say your charm would be able to turn everyone's head. That's what make me feel at ease and like you just the way you are. Ah. Are you embarrassed? It's not just embarrassment. I also thought that you're like, forcing something. Foo-foo, Sate. You really do understand a lot. My comment earlier was sincere, though. Still, I know you were trying to find someone who can adopt Shiro-chan, you know? But you had this aura of wanting to keep Shiro-chan more than I expected, so I thought you looked a bit sad. And I think since it's an introduction from Misaki-san, I'm pretty sure the pursuane won't be someone weird, but I'll still assess whether they're capable of taking care of Shiro-chan or not. In response to my words, Minamino's voice rang out as if admitting something. It was a span of time that didn't exceed a month. Yet, within that period that felt both long and short, I, and a single white kitten spent time together in the living room of my house. I get what you mean. Hearing all that, it was the only response I could utter. I see, you get it, huh? Minamino answered as such, closing her previously talkative mouth. Before looking into the cage, her expression showed a very gentle smile. Once again, I couldn't help but be a little captivated by Minamino. As the scenery outside the train window passed by, I thought that having this smile all to myself was a luxurious way to spend a holiday. Chapter 15. The condo was not far from Mitaka Station. It was a clean, though not very large, building. There was an intercom with a security system at the entrance, and with a little bit of nervousness, Minamino and I entered the given apartment number and pressed the call button. Shortly after, an elegant female voice echoed, and the automatic door opened. Minamino and I walked in together. The frontmost unit was 101. That was the room we were heading to. Welcome. Satou Hajime-kun and Minamino Chinatsu-san, right? Thank you for coming all this way. Can you both come in for now? Pressing the intercom button in front of the room once again, the same voice from earlier spoke, and the sound of an unlocking door accompanied the electronic tone. Minamino and I exchanged glances, and I gently pulled the door open. I'm sorry for the informal welcome. Please come all the way in. As we took off our shoes in the entrance and stepped inside, a voice came from further inside. Following that voice, Minamino and I walked into the living room. A woman was standing by the open kitchen-style stove, stirring a pot. Although I had heard she was in her early elderly years, she appeared much younger than I had imagined. A cane was leaned against the wall next to her. I knew she had a bit of trouble with her leg, but it seemed she could stand and cook even without the cane. Nice to meet you, I am Satou Hajime. I came here because of Akino Misaki-san's introduction. Same here, I am Minamino Chinatsu, Sate-kun's classmate. Minamino and I introduced ourselves before bowing both our heads. My. Nice to meet the both of you too. I'm Kadoaki Kanard. I'm sorry for the casual welcome. As compensation, you can have high expectations for lunch. And, thank you once again for today. Is that little one Shiro-chan? Smiling and tilting her head slightly as she looked at the cage I held, her demeanor was somewhat odd for a woman of her age and generation. But it was a charming aspect. Given that she lived alone, it made sense. But her place was not only that, it had a calm and quiet atmosphere. The rich smell of beef stew being cooked on the stove wafted throughout the room, tantalizing my senses. To make sure the little kitten feels comfortable, I've also covered up the cords. Originally, when my husband lived here, we had cats too. I don't think the smell lingers anymore, but I imagine it can be nerve-wracking in an unfamiliar place. Is it okay if I open the cage and let the kitten roam freely? Shiro-chan is welcome anywhere except the rooms with closed doors. Upon hearing this, I surveyed the area again. Dangerous items were put away, and the cords were covered. Considering the rooms with doors open as well, it was evident that she was carefully preparing the space for the kitten's arrival. Shiro, wanna come out? Speaking to Shiro in that manner, I placed the cage on the floor and opened its door. Shiro cautiously stepped out, sniffing the floor. It was the same when Shiro was at my place. Slowly, Shiro explored, swaying its tail as it sniffed various scents. Minamino looked on, a bit concerned but refraining from intervening. Well then, Let's have Shiro-chan get used to the surroundings slowly. As I mentioned earlier, thank you once again. Since it's a special occasion, why don't we have a little chat while having a meal? It's been a while since I've talked with young people, so I'm feeling a bit enthusiastic. Thank you very much. We appreciate your hospitality. Thank you. Oh, we'll handle the dishes, so please feel free to tell us what to do. Since I had already heard from Misaki-san about her profession and the desire to have lunch together, Minamino and I sincerely thanked her and headed to the kitchen to help with the meal preparations. Chapter 16. The slow-cooked beef stew was delicious as it melted in my mouth. Kanard-san's calm demeanor and wide range of topics helped create a relaxed atmosphere. Despite being in an unfamiliar place, both Minamino and I felt completely at ease, both mentally and in terms of our stomachs. So, are you two a couple? Cough. Perhaps because of that, Kanard-san suddenly asked such a question with a smile, and I ended up coughing on the tea I was drinking. No. Minamino and I are friends, not in that kind of relationship. Besides, she's quite popular at school, so the fact that we've become friends like this is really coincidental. My, really? You know, since you came into the room, you both seem to have that kind of vibe, so I thought maybe you were already in that kind of relationship. This really won't do for me. I guess because of my line of work, I tend to jump to those kinds of conclusions too quickly. I see. So, it's not that kind of relationship yet. Well then, what about you two? How did you first meet? Saying this with a grin, Kanard-san turned her gaze towards Minamino this time. You see, it's really not. While I almost got fooled by her soft expression, just as she tried to steer the conversation in that direction forcefully and completely, I was about to interject with a more genuine response when Minamino laughed. Ha ha ha, you're really in the mood for an interview, aren't you? By the way, this is my first time meeting a novelist. There were many genres in that field, but among them, Kanard-san was a well-known author specializing in slightly peculiar stories, a mix of mystery and romance that revolved around the youth of high school and college students. Her real name, not a pen name, was used. She even won a bookseller award for one of her works. Both Minamino and I knew her name. When I first heard it from Misaki-san, I could hardly believe my ears. And then, she had also told us about wanting to know what led to us taking care of the kitten. Since it's not often that she meets high school students, she mentioned wanting to use our experience as a reference. However, it seemed that I didn't fully consider how she might want to refer to our experience despite knowing her works. It was a complete oversight on my part. Minamino and I did indeed become close through the connection of taking care of Shiro. We got to know each other's more genuine expressions and built a comfortable relationship. However, watching Minamino at school still occasionally made me feel like we lived in different worlds. Sure, Minamino might not have been her real self at school, but in the first place, even acting aside, the fact that she could be one of the most popular people in the school indicated her inherent charm. Just because I've come to know the real self recently doesn't mean there aren't plenty of guys who could accept her act. Not to mention her real self, it felt somewhat disproportionate for someone like Minamino to be suspected of being in a romantic relationship with me, but there was nothing I could do about that. However, in contrast to my inner thoughts, Minamino was using her natural communication skills to the fullest, engaging in a lively conversation about our meeting with the kitten and our relationship. Kanard-san, still smiling, was nodding along as she listened. She seemed to be jotting down notes on a notebook as she listened, but I hoped that her next work wouldn't involve a kitten, a beautiful girl, and an unremarkable guy. Feeling a little awkward, I excused myself to use the restroom. As I left the table and entered the restroom, a warm sensation spread at my feet. Shiro had approached and was rubbing its head against my legs, seeking attention. Good for you. Kanard-san seems like a nice person, so be sure to be a good kitten, okay? Saying that while stroking Shiro's head, it pushed back with more force than I expected, almost leaning its whole body against me. I crouched down and scratched behind Shiro's ears with light strokes. In response, it placed its front paw on my left knee, as if urging me to continue. Hee hee. This is the last time, so I'll give you all I've got today. However, I couldn't stay in the hallway by the restroom forever. I lifted Shiro and returned to the living room. It's a little sad that it's the last time for you guys to meet. If you're free, why not come visit again? It would be good if the both of you come, but it's also fine if you come alone. I'd be happy to treat you to a meal at the very least. As Kanade-san brought the topic up, I was surprised. I wondered if she had overheard my earlier muttering, or rather, the words I had said to Shiro. I think the reason why Kanade-san wants me to come together with Minamino is mainly because of your desire to write something. But is it really okay to go to such lengths for someone like me? Kanade-san fell into the category of what you would call a famous person, and I'm sure there are many fans who would want to get closer to someone like her. While I can understand why she wanted to connect with Minamino, who is both charming and sociable, I can't help but wonder if the reason why she wanted to be friendly with me, who only happened to take in a kitten, was because of Misaki-san's referral. Of course, from what Chinatsu-san had shared to me earlier and the way you look at Shiro-chan, I can tell that you're a kind person, Hajime-kun. Someone like that is always welcome here. I'm honored. I glanced at Minamino, wondering how the conversation went. She noticed and gave me a thumbs up. No, it's not the time for a thumbs up. Just earlier, I was talking with Chinatsu-san about this, but calling yourself someone like me is a bit of a demerit point. Hajime-kun, you're much more wonderful than you think. Don't worry, I can vouch for that. I mean, I don't think someone who I've only known for 2 hours can say that, I said with a hint of exasperation at her assurance that sounded as if we had known each other for a long time. It's not like that, Sate. I think you'd be fantastic if you let yourself out a bit more, like when you used to play basketball at Misaki-san's place. Don't join in and tease me, Minamino, but well, thanks. And you're right. I guess it's not really the end if I'll come to check on things again. Making that comment while patting Shiro, who was gazing at me with a sound like a soft purr, I added, "What's wrong, Shiro?" "Right, Shiro-chan." "You'd prefer that too, wouldn't you?" Meow. Shiro rarely made a sound, and it happened to do so at the perfect moment. We all laughed together. It seemed I wasn't saying goodbye to Shiro just yet, and probably not to Minamino either. And so, the abandoned kitten that I picked up on a whim ended up in the care of a kind owner. Chapter 17. After leaving Kanade-san's condo in the evening, Minamino and I were once again on the train. There were many seated passengers, but it was much emptier compared to the usual weekday evenings. As we approached my stop, Minamino tried to start a conversation with me several times, but each time it stopped before fully forming. Somehow, I was also caught in that atmosphere, and my words became heavy. In silence, Minamino and I stood side by side, holding onto the handrails. The weight that was in my right hand on the way there was now absent, and I definitely felt a slight sense of loneliness because of it. "You know, today," Minamino finally managed to say, and I replied with a simple yeah. "Kanade-san was nice, and it was really enjoyable, wasn't it?" "Yeah, and not just today, but ever since we found Shiro, it's been fun." "Yes, it was fun. That's why I feel lonely." But expressing the fun was the only enjoyable part. I had a feeling that if I put my loneliness into words, I would only feel more lonely. Also, I had fun too. "So, Sate." As the train emitted a squeal and began braking, it slid into the platform. We still had 2 stops, and while we stopped slightly longer due to waiting for the limited express, during this pause, Minamino called my name again. "I've been meaning to return this, and also because you've helped me a lot, so here." With a hint of hesitation, Minamino took out a duplicate key and a neatly wrapped package from her bag and handed them to me. "This is?" Looking at what I received along with the key, I looked at Minamino. "It's your duplicate key and, a sports towel." I wasn't sure what would be a good way to thank you, but I thought it might come in handy when you're playing basketball. Honestly, this is the first time I've given a gift to a guy, and I didn't have anyone to ask for advice. "I'm not sure if you'll like it, but please accept it." Observing her, I noticed her cheeks had turned a bit red as the evening light streamed in. Perhaps she had trouble finding a way to start the conversation to give me these things. The Minamino. With that thought, a sensation of fullness welled up in me, and thank you was the best I could muster. And then, it happened, just when I wished that I could end the day with this bittersweet feeling of both loneliness and happiness, a voice that I both longed to hear again and didn't want to hear echoed. Oh, if it isn't Satou, with his black hair and face that anyone would say is well-featured, tall and with a good physique. His straight gaze at me carries a sense of confidence that's undeniable. He was holding a shoebox and a bag, probably on his way home from club activities. I knew him. Come to think of it, before I moved, his stop was also in this direction. Kanezaki, huh? Long time no see. I never thought I'd run into you here of all places. And to think you're with such a cute girl. Is she your girlfriend? Though, I guess that's unlikely. Comparing Minamino and me with his gaze, he smirked slightly. Yeah, he hadn't changed at all. I thought that as I glanced at him, I wondered if he realized or didn't realize my thoughts. But Kanezaki was smiling brightly and speaking to Minamino with an air of familiarity. Hello, I'm Kanezaki, Satou's friend from middle school. Nice to meet you. I was surprised to see such a beautiful girl alongside someone I know. How do you two know each other? Nice to meet you. Minamino looked at the guy, who was now addressing her with a casual tone, then glanced at me with a slight hesitation. She must have wanted to ensure that she didn't seem disrespectful if he was indeed a friend. However, truthfully, I wanted him gone as soon as possible. But the train was no place to escape. The train doors closed as the train began moving, and it started to depart the platform. She's a friend from the same high school. Sorry, but we're in the middle of a conversation, so could you back off? With a hint of resignation, that's all I managed to say. Honestly, after what had happened, and given we hadn't stayed in touch, I couldn't understand why he would go out of his way to approach us. Maybe he saw Minamino and thought he'd get closer by talking about me. That was my guess, at least. After that statement, and observing Minamino's demeanor before that, I couldn't decipher what Kanezaki had interpreted from our relationship. However, with a fresh and composed face, he plastered on a smile that seemed like he had thought of something and said the one thing I least wanted to hear. That was Kanezaki for you. And I knew it. I knew it and yet couldn't stop it. After all these years, you're still saying such cold things. You know, I was really worried about you, losing your whole family and becoming an orphan. Seeing you now, I'm glad that the guy who had been living in solitude had finally experienced spring in his life. My heart sank. How dare you say that, when not at least once did you reach out? Also, did you know? Back in middle school, he was even rumored to be a little sister killer, and he became a loner because of it. My heart sank into a cold and dark abyss. A rumor, huh? But I only confided in you, so I wonder where did that rumor come from, huh? I don't know about high school, but seeing a girl like you with him means he's hiding it from you, right? Anyway, you're really beautiful, huh? How about you and I hang out sometime as friends? I'll give my contact info. Pouring out meaningless words that I couldn't understand, he exuded an endless air of freshness. That was Kanezaki for you. A guy who projected a serene atmosphere despite his words dripping with spite. I wanted to punch my past self for not noticing sooner. Such a guy continued to talk to Minamino. Hey, cut the crap. I intended to call out, but all that came out of my mouth was a hoarse voice. I felt pathetic to continue to be uncomfortable around someone like him, to not even be able to put up a front in front of Minamino. But just then, a warm sensation enveloped the right hand of such a pathetic guy like me. Sorry, but I really can't stand people who casually talk about a person's past and laugh about it in a place like this, especially a person who's important to me. It's just too much for me to handle. So, could you please not approach me again? A resolute voice echoed through my freezing heart. Looking up, I saw Kanezaki's surprised expression. A guy who, back in middle school, with his impeccably composed face and voice, managed to win over the girls and make the atmosphere turn to his advantage. To see him with such a look on his face, and above all, to feel the strong grip of Minamino's hand holding onto my right hand. My brain experienced a momentary dysfunction. Unbeknownst to me, the train had arrived at a familiar platform. "Let's go, Hajime." Saying that, Minamino pulled my right hand, guiding me close as she walked toward the exit. Even though her stop wasn't here, she continued toward the ticket gate as if she were protecting me from the malevolence I'd just encountered. Section. Minamino, I'm not apologizing. Eh? As Minamino continued to lead me along, my head was filled with confusion. I attempted to call out her name as a way to express my gratitude, but before I could, Minamino shouted out forcefully, trying to thank her. I turned to look at her face, but my words faded away as a question escaped my lips. Minamino was crying. While crying, she continued to walk ahead, holding onto my hand. Somehow, the path that Minamino and I walked together, carrying Shiro's litter box, had transformed into us walking hand in hand. I somehow had the feeling that you had secrets, Sate. Like why you live alone in a house, why you've never brought up your family, why you work part-time, and why you've been avoiding too much social interaction. I've been curious about all that, and now I know. I kept thinking that maybe that guy from earlier really was your friend. I kept thinking that maybe I've messed things up, that I was being too nosy, but seeing that expression on your face. I don't want anyone who would make you, who's precious to me, look like that, to be your friend. With her own right hand wiping away her tears while her left hand held onto my right hand with an unyielding grip, Minamino continued to walk. I thought to myself, man, this is impossible. My state of mind felt like I had raised the white flag of surrender. I knew it. Over the past month, little by little, I had come to understand far more than I needed to. However, I had hesitated to put words to that understanding, using Shiro as an excuse, using school and my position as justifications. I had held back from giving those feelings and that understanding a name in my heart. Even without consulting a dictionary, the name for my emotions was clear. It was right there, yet I pretended not to see it, despite knowing. Even though my feelings for this girl who cried and got angry on my behalf were clear, even though I understood, and yet I had been pretending not to see. I had been so overwhelmed that I couldn't even feign ignorance anymore. I'm sorry, Minamino. It's not I'm sorry, but the words that escaped my mouth were an apology, and even that was met with Minamino's anger. Thank you. After a moment of contemplation, I corrected myself. Let's go home. The next words I said were apparently a complete pass. Yeah, let's go back to your house, Sate. With our hands remained clasped, I walked back home with the girl who was strong and fragile, yet an unbelievably precious presence that had become indispensable in my life. Chapter 18. Even after entering the house, Minamino and I spent some time in silence. I had wanted to talk to Minamino about what happened earlier, about the things Kanezaki had said, and everything. But in times like these, I wasn't sure what the right thing to say was. I didn't know where to start the conversation. Yet, deep down, I knew that I should be the one to speak up, whether it was to apologize for not telling her earlier or to tell her not to worry too much. Even though I didn't know exactly what to say, I understood that I should be the one to break the silence. However, something within me was resisting, refusing to let the words escape. Little sister killer. That was a term I couldn't deny if it were used to describe me, but I couldn't imagine Minamino saying something like that. Honestly, I thought I no longer held on to the sadness and loneliness from back then, but the fact remained that words didn't come out when I was faced with Kanezaki, and now, what swirled within me was fear. I, who would cunningly escape from having my mask stripped away by others while shedding theirs, was still stuck in a standstill. Actually, I was quite a daddy's girl back then. In place of someone as pathetic as me, it was Minamino who broke the silence. My mind was filled with thoughts of what to say, what to discuss, and in that moment, I raised my head and looked at Minamino. Minamino's large eyes had been fixed on mine all along. Both of my parents worked, and my mom had a full-time job in a company, but they were both kind. Although my mom was more like an education-focused mom who worried about what others had to say. When I managed to do things well, it was fine with her, but she scolded me often too, and about what happened in middle school, And even when I wanted to transfer to a different high school, my decisions weren't met with her approval. Despite that, my dad always pampered me, supported me since a long time ago, and was very cool. He would always tell me that I should do whatever I like. It was like a drama, you know? A mother who was gentle yet strict, a daughter who loved her family, and a father who was sweet. I thought we were a pretty good family. I didn't understand why Minamino suddenly started talking about this, and I didn't know what was going on in her mind. But it wasn't the usual joking atmosphere, and I wasn't in a mental state to respond. However, I could sense that Minamino had started this conversation with some kind of resolution. I listened to her words without saying anything. I began to feel that something was amiss around the summer of my third year in middle school when I was working hard to study for high school entrance exams. I'd stay up late at night studying, and during that time, my parents started having more arguments. As a result, my dad started coming home later and later. And then, I successfully passed the exams, and spring arrived. When it was time to enter high school, my parents came with me. I was a bit happy about that, and I was all excited to show that I was going to do well in high school. But then rumors started circulating among the seniors and classmates that there was a cute girl in our school, and things turned out the way they are now, and that was the last time our family of 3 could be together. Don't push yourself too hard, but do your best. I remember feeling puzzled when Dad said that to me when we arrived home. Not long after that, he left. My mom began to speak ill of Dad, and that's how I found out that our family was completely broken. I heard they're going to officially divorce this coming winter, Minamino murmured. My mouth remained firmly shut, as if I had lost the ability to speak properly. I only heard bits and pieces of conversation and complaints from my mom, but it seems that the reason why Dad started coming home later and later was not only because of his work but because he was also having an affair with someone from work. It sounds stupid, right? Apparently because his partner was young, she could understand his feelings. He even started consulting with her about family problems, and then it turned into that kind of relationship, and they even had a child together. It's really disgusting. He's seriously the worst, don't you think? And it seems like Mom will get my custody. She told me that, with alimony coming in, I didn't have to worry about money, and that since she had a job. She also told me not to worry about college. She apologized and cried. And yet, you know, I still kinda like my dad. Isn't that dumb? Even though he did terrible things, left us, and even though I feel sorry for my mum, I'm still a daddy's girl at heart. At home, my dad is like the villain, and it's very painful. Do I also have to wear my mask even at home, not just at school? Thinking things like that, I wandered aimlessly as I couldn't take anything anymore. Then I found a kitten, and just like how you saved the kitten, I found myself leaning on you as if you had saved me too, Sate, using you as my refuge when I didn't want to go back home. That's why I kind of, hated it when I gave you the duplicate key back earlier, she said while sticking her tongue out. Even though I'm considered popular at school and all that, I can't even take off my mask outside except in front of you, Sate. This is the real me, Minamino Chinatsu. These are everything, my everything. Minamino. Why tell me this? As if to interrupt that, Minamino held her hand in front of me. Let me finish everything first. Hey, Sate. Sorry for imposing, for blurting this out, for exposing all this. But I wanted you to know about me, and I also want to know about you too, Sate. I thought I was totally uncool for being afraid how Minamino would view me, who had made her, a girl who seemed strong yet weak, lonely yet resolute, and someone who I shouldn't have had anything to do with. Yet before I knew it, I couldn't help but find my gaze inexplicably fixed on her, like this. So, I forced open my mouth, which seemed to have lost the ability to produce words. I bet what I would share wouldn't be that fun, you know? Wasn't mine not funny there? I want to know your story. It's fine. You can take your time. Saying that, she looked at me straight into my eyes, but with a hint of anxiety in her trembling gaze. Chapter 19. Beep beep. In the midst of the deafening silence, all I could simply hear was a steady mechanical sound resonating in the room. I couldn't even utter a word for a while. I was surrounded by white walls. Around me were adults dressed in similarly white attire. And before me lay a girl connected to tubes all over her body, peacefully sleeping. She was the sole family I had left, alive. She was in a sense, in a state of death by legal and medical standards, yet was kept alive by what bound her. She was the only sibling I had, my little sister, whom I would bring death upon with my own hands. I stood there, clenching my fist so hard it drained of color. Yet I didn't raise or strike with it. The day had started like any other, but it wouldn't follow its usual course. It was the day when everything would be taken away from me by something incomprehensible called fate. Listen to me calmly. Your family members were involved in an accident. Even upon hearing those words, my smile broke. I don't quite understand your words, Sensei. I understood the words, but the meaning eluded me. An accident? Dad, Mom, and Miho got into one? I'll be driving you there now. Keep your composure. And do you know your relative's contact information? I'm sure it'll be all right. The concerned words of my homeroom teacher and grade head teacher in the hallway didn't resonate with me as reality. It all began with my sister's selfish desire to go to the beach. My parents and sister had already left in the morning for a celebration trip to celebrate our move. I had planned to join them later by train after briefly attending the club activities at the end of term assembly before summer break. My parents were what you might call eloping, and as a result, I have no contact whatsoever with my maternal relatives. Additionally, my paternal grandparents have passed away. The only remaining relative on my father's side is my uncle, but he's always traveling abroad, so I'm not sure if I can get in touch with him. The male and female teachers who had been questioning me fell silent at my words. Perhaps they were thinking about the difficulties that lay ahead for me, manifesting their concern through their silence. And so, without any real understanding of the situation, I was taken to a prefectural hospital facing the sea in the neighboring prefecture. In the room I entered initially, I saw my parents with fabric covering their faces. No more laughter or scolding. Their lifeless bodies said nothing. Even after seeing that, my mind conjured up thoughts like, I've seen this in dramas, as if it were unreal. A man in a white coat approached. His expression was grave. Then came a brief silence. Even for a doctor who had relatively grown accustomed to death and delivering such news, what he had to convey to me must have been a heavy reality. Miho, my little sister, where is she? Breaking the silence, it was my voice that spoke. I was seeking answers. There were supposed to be 3 of them in the car. This way. Saying that, I followed the doctor who walked ahead. Only the sound of footsteps echoed until the doctor stopped in front of a certain room. Miho. It was then that I finally understood. The moments when the teachers at school spoke to me, when I saw my silent parents earlier, the feeling of floating in an unreal world like on a television drama, all merged with the world in front my eyes, the reality. Unconsciously, my voice slipped out. Even though it was my own, it sounded distant. I no longer felt the pain in my hand, which had turned white from gripping too tightly, nor did I notice the surroundings. I only looked in front. On the other side of the glass window through the room, lay a girl connected to numerous tubes. The scene from moments ago came back to me. The image of my parents lying in a windowless, dark room, and I came to realize that I was now alone in this world. I've heard that the accident involving your parents and your sister was quite severe. The words were delivered to me by the doctor as I faced them without uttering a word. The conversation began as such. Seeing no reaction from me, the doctor continued, speaking with a level of courtesy and composure that seemed almost mismatched towards a child. When they were rushed to the hospital, your parents had already passed away. Your sister was in critical condition, unconscious, but there were still signs of life, so immediate life-saving measures were taken. However, at that point, the doctor cut his words short, not to calm me down but to compose himself before delivering the next part, and then he continued, however, despite our efforts, a short while ago, Miho was determined to be in a state where spontaneous breathing was no longer possible. At present, she is being kept alive through an artificial respirator, with her heart and lung functions being supported. You mean, she's in a vegetative state? To my words. The doctor shook his head. No. A typical vegetative state involves the loss of partial or complete cerebral function, resulting in an unconscious state. However, the brainstem and cerebellum often retain some function, allowing for spontaneous breathing. Occasionally, recovery is possible, and this is fundamentally different from brain death. However, her current situation is. Does that mean there's no chance of recovery? Yes, though struggling for words. I managed to ask, which the doctor nodded in return. Her current situation is an irreversible cessation of all brain functions, including the brainstem. There is no possibility of recovery. Even with the artificial respirator, her heart is likely to stop within a few days. In other words, in her current situation, it's possible to keep her on an artificial respirator until her heart stops spontaneously. However, the decision for that is generally left to the family's wishes. That's, at the doctor's words. I understood. Surprisingly, my heart and my mind were remarkably calm. Can I go near my little sister, Miho? After a long silence, I asked the doctor. The doctor nodded silently and gave us, me and Miho, some time. I wonder how much time passed after that. 10 minutes, maybe an hour. Ending that moment, which felt like an eternity yet a fleeting instant, I once again looked down at the girl in front of me. She looks like she's suffering. Even though she's usually so busy laughing or getting angry. Artificially breathing, and the incongruous sound of intermittent beeps, along with the tubes that seemed disproportionately connected to the girl, appeared to me as if she was struggling to breathe more than anything else. Please, help Miho, my little sister, find relief. Even though the voice that delivered those words didn't feel like my own, I made a decision of my own accord. Regrettably, I wasn't a child to the extent of not understanding the doctor's words, and yet, I wasn't an adult to the point of being confident about letting things remain as they were. So, I voiced it once more. She looks so pained. Please put an end to it. Miho disliked being in pain. To that statement, the doctor, the only person present, simply nodded in silence. The beeping sounds ceased. 20th of July, 2021, 16:18. Time of cardiac arrest confirmed. Listening to the doctor's words, I continued to gaze at my little sister's face. Chapter 20. Minamino Chinatsu listened in silence as Satou Hajime recounted his story while stammering. She wanted to cry even at this moment. She wanted to hug the person in front of her, but Satou was speaking without tears, and so she couldn't cry. She held her emotions in, clenching her teeth, making sure nothing overflowed. She didn't avert her eyes, intent on not missing a single thing he said. Besides, this was surely only the beginning, not the entirety of it. Once he finished everything, Chinatsu thought before sitting in her chair, as if to tie herself down. To be honest, when I was left alone like that, I think I must have been desperate. I remember it clearly, yet it feels like a memory of something distant, like I'm watching it from the other side of a television screen. Facing Chinatsu, who was listening without a word, I was talking about what had happened to Satou Hajime. Strangely, I felt like I was able to arrange everything I'd experienced in chronological order. And there's a bit more to the story. Next, I need to tell you about my uncle. The first thing I learned after losing my family was that when someone dies, there's a lot of paperwork and procedures involved, and sometimes adults are needed for those. There were so many things to do. That's why I could say that I wasn't swallowed by despair. From the first day of summer vacation, with the support of kind adults around me, I did various things. My parents' colleagues, a middle-aged man from the city office, doctors and nurses at the hospital, the people at the temple I was introduced to. Surprisingly, everyone was kind, caring, sympathetic. For the first time in my life, I became the chief mourner at a funeral. For the first time in my life, I learned that there were plans for funerals and that there was a cost to a grave. I learned that there were inheritance issues and various procedures involved in withdrawing money from a bank account under the name of a deceased person. It was knowledge I acquired while dealing with everything in front of me. My parents were ordinary office workers, not wealthy. Furthermore, there were no other family members besides me, and the only relative I knew about was an uncle whose whereabouts were unknown. In the end, what remained for me were the rights to the life insurance policies my parents had, the compensation rights from the accident, apparently involving a collision with a drowsy truck driver, the fully paid-off new house whose loan was cleared due to my parents' passing, and my father's smartphone that miraculously survived the major accident. After completing the necessary procedures on my own, I began taking action to contact my only surviving blood relative, my uncle. There were no notes with his contact information on the fridge or in the places where documents were kept. Moreover, the only thing I knew about my uncle was that he would appear out of nowhere, bringing souvenirs from various countries or giving me pocket money. I had heard he was a peculiar person who conducted various businesses with just a smartphone. He was a man who always dressed immaculately despite living in hotels all over due to not having a permanent address. Unfortunately, I hadn't seen him since I started using a smartphone, and I didn't even know how to contact him. Charging my father's smartphone, I unlocked it to check if there were any contact details for relatives. After charging, notifications started flooding in after the Apple logo appeared. Even if I couldn't unlock it, I could still see the contents of the notifications. When I realized that the most recent notification was just moments ago, the intercom at the entrance rang. When I opened the door, there stood the uncle I'd been searching for. He looked at me with an unfamiliar expression, his hair disheveled, dressed in untidy clothes. KKU, that was the name displayed in the numerous notifications from earlier. The uncle who had become my only living blood relative, standing right in front of me in a state of bewilderment. Section, I'm sorry. At the family altar, my uncle, who had been praying for a long time, turned to face me and uttered those words. He was apologizing for not being there when it mattered the most. Not being around during the critical time, being abroad and realizing the contact from our mutual acquaintance too late. Finding out that I was the sole survivor and desperately calling my father's phone repeatedly. Managing to return to the country, relying on the address that had been given to him right after he arrived at the airport. He was truly, deeply regretful. Having spoken up to that point, he cut off his words and began to cry as he looked at me. He was sobbing, the first time I had seen an adult man openly weeping. After crying his heart out, my uncle sprang into action with great determination. He made numerous phone calls, contacting acquaintances such as tax accountants and lawyers, and together they completed various procedures that had been stalled when I was alone. My uncle had cared deeply for me. My father and he were truly close brothers. You know, how do I put it? My older brother was the only one who stood by me, supporting my desire for freedom and aversion to rules. He stood between our parents, your grandparents, and even stood by me through the passing of our mother from an unexpected illness while I was wandering overseas, as well as shortly thereafter, our father's passing. He fulfilled the role of providing security by working for a stable company, but also the role of setting me free. He fulfilled all of that, even though he must have had his own desires and ambitions. Perhaps it wasn't just his luck, but his talent as well. Amidst having only my father as an ally, my uncle, who dropped out of what could be considered the best university in Japan to start his own business, overcame various obstacles and eventually achieved financial success. However, my father never asked for anything in return even after his success. He never relied on my uncle financially. At most, he would ask for landscape scenery of the countries he visited or souvenirs when my uncle went on trips. I wanted to give something back, but now, both my older brother and Kani-san are gone. Even my Ho-chan. So, let me start by returning that favor to you. Saying this, my uncle began to teach me various things. In a way, he was unexpectedly skilled in doing almost everything necessary for life despite his claim to valuing freedom above all else. Later, I realized that my uncle's time was extremely valuable. Running multiple businesses, he was needed in various places. Despite this, my uncle invested half a year of his time into helping me survive, cleaning, laundry, cooking, researching various essential household matters. I had the impression that the significance of my parents' lives was somehow linked to it, and the education about money, which I had been avoiding, continued rigorously until I completed middle school. The knowledge about investing the money I had received, the ins and outs of accumulation and ETFs, the distinction between investment and speculation. Money was merely a tool to provide you with choices. The money I had received wasn't a replacement for my parents' lives, rather, it was part of the risk management strategy they had set up for situations like this. He even taught me how to earn money through video editing, something even a student could do, perhaps to ensure that I wouldn't struggle financially in a life without parents. My uncle hammered into me the means to survive. At the same time as entering high school, my uncle returned to his original job. It was undoubtedly thanks to my uncle that I didn't stray or lose my way during the last season of middle school. We kept in touch, meeting every 3 months. He was my invaluable teacher. Chapter 21. That was the reason why I could live on my own until now. My living expenses are also covered by my uncle if things get tough, and I manage my finances according to the rules, like spending little or allotting how much I should spend. I also earn a bit of pocket money from making clips from live streams. Besides, my uncle advised me to learn how to earn money through physical work that requires adhering to a fixed schedule so as not to wear my body out. So I also work part-time at an izakaya. Through this kind of lifestyle, I ended up talking about basketball with a senior from work, and that's how I met Misaki-san and the others. I had thought it might be a good place to end the story up to this point. However, Minamino's eyes indicated that my story wasn't over yet, and maybe, I also wanted to tell Minamino. What I was about to say was something I hadn't told my uncle. Kanezaki really loves to mess things up. The biggest mistake in my relatively short life was getting involved with him. Actually, I think it'd be fine if I told you what happened before entering high school and meeting you. After all, you told me everything about you, Minamino. So, I want to tell you everything. Everything about me, too. Will you lend me your ear? Minamino just nodded lightly. With that alone, I felt relieved. After the accident involving my family, I didn't have a chance to meet up with my friends during the summer vacation that followed. There had been messages from the club advisor about club activities, as well as some messages showing concern, but I was too preoccupied to respond. After that, I started living with my uncle, so my last summer vacation in middle school was spent in an uncharacteristic way for a middle school student. That's why it was truly a coincidence. Oh, if it isn't fate, I was out shopping alone when I heard a voice. It was Kanezaki, a guy who had a well-featured face, refreshing air, a good family background, and financial resources. It was unclear why he was in an ordinary public middle school with nothing particularly special to write about. And as a matter of course, he was the most popular guy in middle school. At that time, although we were in the same basketball club, we were in different classes and different groups of friends, so our friendship wasn't particularly deep. However, I did admire how he enjoyed spending time with girls and having fun, and I didn't have any negative impressions of him at the time. The only area I had advantage over Kanezaki was in basketball. I played as a point guard, PG, and Kanezaki was also in the same position. Our overall athletic ability aside, I had been familiar with basketball since my mini basketball days, influenced by my uncle and father. Surprisingly, I had a knack for basketball from a young age. By my second year, I had become a regular player, while Kanezaki, although he was not originally a shooting guard, SG, he became one and held a regular position. Kanezaki, huh? It's been a while. Sorry about the club activities. At that time, I was only looking at Kanezaki's refreshing appearance. That was my mistake. It's fine, but seems like you've had it rough, huh? Are you okay? No need to worry about the club, Sate. Just do what you need to do. If anything comes up, feel free to talk to me. Back then, in a way, I was supported by people's kindness, which in turn prevented me from harboring suspicions about others. So, I ended up sharing something I had been struggling with at that time, something I couldn't even tell my uncle. Yes, it was about the decision I made to remove my sister's respirator. There was no other choice. That's what I believed. It was inevitable. as the doctors had said, and I kept telling myself that. However, after a little time had passed and I was sorting through my things, that small thorn within me, like a piece of debris, was seeking an outlet. Yes, I probably wanted someone to listen to my story. I couldn't tell my uncle, who blamed himself for not making it in time. Even though I had good friends, I couldn't create opportunities to talk about something like this by calling or meeting up. Somehow, I felt like casually meeting someone I didn't usually interact with, like Kanezaki, might be a good way to vent. Actually, we had free time, and we sat down to talk. I was taken to a cafe by him. As he treated me to a drink, I somehow ended up talking about my parents' accident, my sister, and the things I was struggling with. Kanezaki was good at drawing out the conversation section, and then, as the summer vacation came to an end and the second semester began, rumors started circulating throughout the school about my parents' accident and the fact that I was a sister killer. "Eh?" Minamino exclaimed with a shocked expression. "I swear, I haven't told anyone about that except for Kanezaki." Even though the teachers knew about my situation, I didn't think they would spread it around. Moreover, no one should have known about what had happened to my little sister. Why? Why would? I thought the same thing and confronted Kanezaki about it, and after hearing his response, I kind of lost the will to argue back. "I was worried about you, so I ended up telling everyone. I'm sorry the rumors spread in a strange way. I don't think the basketball team can continue like this, but I'll do my best in the final tournament in your stead, Sate." Kanezaki said that and laughed. I didn't understand what was so funny about those words, but hearing them and looking at Kanezaki again, I understood the ugliness behind the seemingly refreshing guy in front of me. In the first place, was it something that he could just tell everyone? Could the rumors really just easily twist into a way that only the part about me killing my sister be emphasized and spread? Did it bother him that much, to the point where he disliked the fact that someone like me might excel in an area he wasn't as good at? In the class and in the basketball club, there were people who cared, but there were no friends who would go out of their way to help me against the social currents. That's how I ended up feeling tired. Not that I gave up or became indifferent, but I was just tired, in a different way from Minamino. I was exhausted by the dynamics of the school. That's probably why I noticed that you were pushing yourself too hard with your act. But even so, thanks to my uncle and the fact that there's a community outside of school, I've managed to have a moderate time in high school. There are a few people who came from the same middle school, but none of them had any connection to Kanezaki, and above all, thanks to Sate-kun from Class D, I became the number 2. So, in that sense, I guess it helped. Hey, sorry for the lengthy story, but that's all of it. If I were to say it in Minamino style, that's Everett. Mid-sentence, I felt a shock, along with a dizzying sweet fragrance and an indescribable softness that enveloped my head. "Eh? Minamino? Idiot. You idiot. Sate. You idiot. Fool." Minamino was crying, holding on to me tightly and shouting "idiot" into my ear. Why are you saying it while laughing with such a sad look on your face? "Sister killer? There's no way they can call you that. You saved your sister from suffering. It's unthinkable that you have to endure being spoken to in that way." They are infuriating. Those people who made you look like that, who made you force a smile like that despite being the one who suffered the most, like myself, who couldn't even realize the pain you were going through all this time. "Why are you crying, Minamino?" Throughout the whole time you were talking, you had this smile pasted on your face, looking like you were in pain, like you wanted to cry. But because you didn't cry, I'm crying in your stead. Minamino stood up, pulling my head against her chest and crying. She was crying for me. I hadn't shed a tear ever since the accident. It wasn't that I had lost my emotions. I would laugh when watching a comedy show, and I would feel moved by a good novel. It's just that, despite having every reason to feel sad, I just couldn't cry. "Thank you, Minamino, for being there with someone like me." Sorry, didn't sound appropriate, so as I was in her embrace, I instead expressed my gratitude. "No." "Eh?" Minamino denied my words and then, before I could react, she grabbed the collar of my shirt. Before my eyes, her tear-streaked, crumpled face came into view. My face was reflected in her large eyes. Sate. The Sate right in front of me is kind, independent, and laughs like a child whenever he plays basketball. This Sate is definitely not a number 2 or someone like me, no matter what anyone says. You. And suddenly, my collar was pulled, and Minamino's face drew close. Minamino and I were kissing. Pulled in forcefully. Our teeth bumped into each other, but more than any pain, I was stunned by the softness and the fact that Minamino's face was so close, and then, Minamino's face pulled away. That was my first kiss. Got it? Remember, you are someone amazing, Sate. So amazing to the point that I wanted to have my first kiss with you. Breathing heavily, her face as red as a tomato, Minamino said that. I didn't understand what she was saying, but I understood that Minamino and I had kissed, and that Minamino was saying I was amazing. Minamino, I had to say something, but my head was paralyzed, as if it had short-circuited, making it impossible for me to think clearly. Sorry, I said I'd listen to your story, but I'm kind of overwhelmed today, so I'll go home first. Looking at me, Minamino said as such before quickly running to the front door. She didn't even let me escort her out. But I'll come again. With reddened ears, Minamino left with only those words. For a long time, I stood frozen in place, caught between the sensation of her lips and her lingering scent that filled the room. End of Volume 1, The Abandoned Kitten, Her, and Me.